Welcome to Drinks with a VC, where we explore the humanity behind investments. Grab your favorite drink and join us as we laugh, learn, and liquor up with some of our favorite venture capitalists.
Whether you're a startup founder, fellow VC, LP, or just curious about the investor ecosystem, you've found the right podcast. Please like and subscribe.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Drinks with a VC. Thanks for joining us via whichever platform you're using to watch or listen in. I'm Vic Lakhwara, co-founder and general partner of seed fund Green Cow Venture Capital. And as always, I'm joined by my friend and co-hostess with the mostest, Bree Hanson. Today's episode is brought to you by Fidelity Private Shares. Fidelity is committed to supporting startups at all ages. Using the Fidelity Private Shares platform, founders can automate their equity management operations and financings in a single collaborative hub. To learn more about how Fidelity can help your company grow, please check out the episode description below. Hey, Bree, how are you?
I'm good. It's beautiful here in San Francisco. I'm excited for today's guest. Vic, you want to get started?
Yeah, and I think it's so timely, right? We're at a point in time in the startup ecosystem where you have a lot of portfolio companies really stall or plateau and have a hard time raising follow-on capital. And what MBM is doing is really filling a need, in my opinion, in the ecosystem. So excited to dig in. Are we ready? Should I get along with my exhaustively long intro?
Let's hit it.
All right, here we go. Our next guest received a BS from Stanford University and MS from Georgia Tech in electrical engineering. As a graduate student, he was the co-founder and CEO of Chutney Technologies, a data warehousing company that was acquired by Cisco. Shortly afterwards, he found himself in Japan, helping in the successful PE turnaround of Shinsei Bank, eventually managing a $500 million asset-backed portfolio and serving as a senior executive of Shinsei Capital in New York. He would then go on to hold a number of senior leadership positions at an array of financial and investment institutions, including the first publicly traded real estate investment trust, Power REIT, and The Number, a fintech startup focused on using big data to identify fraud and valuation mismatch in consumer and real estate credit. His deep experience in startup and turnaround operations, combined with his roles as an investor in LedgerX, which was acquired by FTX, and as an early advisor in Klarna, would lead him to team up with Lauren Bonner Minicone to form an MBM Capital. Please welcome Philadelphia-born, Virginia-raised, king of comebacks, Arun Mittal. Arun, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. That was a lot.
I'm the king of long-winded compliments and introductions. There
I
you go.
appreciate that. Thank
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks
Yeah.
for coming on. What are we drinking today, Arun?
I've got a Yamazaki 12 that actually a founder gave me a month ago while we were talking about his business.
That's a wonderful gift, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, it was crazy. We were sitting in my buddies at a law firm, and we're like, hey, let's brainstorm what's going to happen. In the middle of the meeting, this guy leaves. I don't know how he got a delivery service, and he shows up with 2 bottles of whiskey. And the lawyers are just like, what's going on here? He's like, hey, we're all drinking.
Yeah.
And if you ever meet this guy, he's got like this big beard. He's just this jolly Ukrainian guy, but it was just hilarious.
Man.
That's a founder pro tip right there. Bring whiskey.
But
It was free, right? So we got all this free advice from the lawyers. And we just kept on pouring them alcohol. And they were like, it's only 30 minutes. And 2 hours later, like everyone's just plastered. And he's just, how should I structure this? I'm like,
so from
what
your
about this issue?
perspective, is that a good investment in the whiskey, or is that sort of a operational expense that you would do without?
I think from a founder's perspective, that was pure genius.
Pure genius. Yeah.
And then it was like, I loved it. And I was just trying to put 2 people together, and it was fun.
Of course you loved it. You got a bottle of Yamazaki 12 out of it. Bree, do you know Yamazaki 12? We need to talk about this for a second.
I do. It's a very nice bottle of whiskey, but I know, Arun, that you are in Japan, so I'd love to hear more about how you might have gotten into the whiskey based on your time there.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I did an overseas studies program when I was a junior in college. And that's when I started drinking. So I wasn't really drinking before I was a junior. So like I got to Japan and started drinking. I was like, I'm never coming back because like working there was tough. I had an internship. And then I found myself there again.
Yeah.
And I had just a crazy time there. But the first year, I think I was drinking like 6 out of 7 days. I like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And it got to the point where we'd start at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
And we were doing this turnaround. I was in operations at the time.
Yeah.
And we'd be drinking until 2, 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And I remember calling in one day. I was like, guys, I can't make it to work.
Yeah.
And my boss was like, you'll be here by 4. We're going to drink.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, like what?
It was just, it was nuts.
But
I really got into whiskey when I moved to stateside.
When you moved back to stateside. Okay. Yeah. All right.
I was a big beer drinker and I drank a little bit of wine. And then I stopped drinking for a year. And then I'm allergic to beer, but I can drink whiskey. So
you can drink whiskey. Cheers to you. And thank you for joining us again.
Absolutely.
This Yamazaki, and I don't want to look, this is going to get me sidetracked because I'm a big Yamazaki fan. I have a quick story to tell, and maybe we'll cut this, maybe we won't. But I remember my cousin, who is an amazing human being. One of my favorite cousins. Don't tell my other cousins that, although cat's out of the bag now.
They don't know.
They don't know. No, they will. He's traveling through Dubai and visiting us in San Francisco at the time. And he goes to the duty-free shop and he gets this bottle of Yamazaki. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been the 18. He gets a bottle of the Yamazaki 18 and brings it for me. And my friends and I, who have no idea what we're doing, polished this thing off in like record time. It wasn't over the course of a day. It was multiple days, etc. But we're just like, oh yeah, let's open it up and drink it. And it's that old adage of you don't know what you have until it's gone. Because it was gone. And I go to buy some. And all of a sudden, over the course of a few months, the price of Yamazaki across the board had skyrocketed in Japan, from Japan into the United States, due to a lack of supply. And then there was this increased demand. And now all of a sudden you had Yamazaki 18 that you could have bought in the Dubai store for $120 is now like $300, $500, etc. And so we had to settle for Yamazaki 12. And one day, and I know this is a long story, but one day, my friend is at a Costco and he sees a pallet of Yamazaki 12 for $69 a bottle.
Wow.
At this Costco, which by the way, was not in San Francisco. It wasn't in Redwood City or Marin, San Rafael area. It was like all the way out in like the East Bay. And I said, okay, just buy me a case, please. I'll pay you back. And I had a case of Yamazaki that we drank. I think the last bottle was drank at my wedding later that, like a couple of years later, whatever.
I would have bought the entire pallet. That's
just
incredible.
It's my favorite. Anyway, so Yamazaki, it's that whiskey that I wish I could get everywhere, but I'm going to settle for what I'm drinking today.
I'll give you another Japanese whiskey just on this topic.
Yeah.
Not to belabor. There's a Japanese whiskey called Toki, Toki. It's like a $35 bottle still.
Yeah.
I know it as like a mixing whiskey, right? Like it's the kind of thing that you would mix with other things because it's like so cheap. Yeah. But it is a fantastic whiskey. Like it's super light, very refreshing, and it's like $35.
Okay.
And I'm a distressed investor, so I'm like, I Yamazaki, Toki. I'm like, oh, that's like good value. But it honestly is like a great whiskey.
No, look, from the investor that has made a living in successful turnarounds and in investing in kind of diamond in the rough type companies, this is a very solid recommendation. I think everyone should just get Toki.
They said, no, drive the price up.
Yeah.
I take it back.
Yeah. No, I take it back. Listen, I appreciate your confidence, but I don't think our listening base is that big yet. It's getting there. Like I think we're surpassing milestones here, but I don't think we're enough to move the needle.
Yeah. Okay, I'll hold you to that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So speaking of holding us to this, one thing that we do always on this podcast is talk about the origin story of our guests. I think we see a lot of parallels with how they've grown up and what experiences they've had with where they're at today across a lot of our guests. So we're always intrigued by this. You were born in Philadelphia the year of the bicentennial. I won't tell the year. I won't say it. And then you moved out of Philly and you spent time in Texas, I believe, and in Virginia. I guess I'm just really interested in knowing, how did your family come to Philadelphia? And then what was the reasoning behind all of the moving?
So it's an interesting story. I don't think it's that interesting, but it's a story that a lot of Indians my age, my generation have.
Yeah.
So my dad moved here. Like, it was hard to immigrate to the US. I think he moved in 68. So 1968. And he basically pretended to be the brother of someone who had like a visa. And that guy had gotten married. Imagine like Indian, young dude, wife, and then my dad was the third wheel.
Yeah.
And they traveled together to Hong Kong and Hawaii and then landed in California. So that's kind of like how they showed up. And he was a civil engineer by training in India, but it wasn't like he had and my dad's probably will kill me because I don't have the exact details, but it was a bachelor's, but it wasn't. So like back then, like you got trained, they were like, okay, go build a bridge.
Yeah.
And that's
learn by doing.
Learn by doing. There's only so much you can learn, right? We're gonna like learn quickly, and we need bridges. Across this river. And so he moved here, and he like found a job. Like, he was way overqualified for the job, and was like, the guys were like, "Hey, you're working too fast.
Yeah.
Read the paper for 2 hours. Don't finish your work this fast. You're making people look bad."
Overachieving. Okay.
Pre-internet. It's, I don't know, like you could just surf the web. Like, you were like, might as well do something.
Just keep working. Yeah.
Just
absolutely.
keep working. And he went to night school and then went back to India, married my mom, brought her over. And then that was 72. And then in 76, I was born.
Question. I must ask you this. Did your parents have an arranged marriage?
They did.
Yeah. So I asked this, and Bree knows this, but my parents also had arranged marriage. It was also in between my dad's degrees in Canada. So he had gone back, and this is really around the same time that your dad came over. So really interesting. I want to dive into that later, but go ahead.
Yeah, it was a small community. From what I understand, they didn't have a lot of money. Like, he showed up with maybe $30 in his pocket.
Yeah.
But like, that life was like completely different than the life that I have lived.
Yeah.
And it was like so much more social. I had an uncle that just passed away, and I was at the funeral, and his kids were talking about like how people would just come to the house unannounced.
Yeah.
Right. And not even, they weren't living in the neighborhood. They would drive over, or they'd show up unannounced.
Yeah.
And they'd only made enough for 8 people or whatever, but now they had 20. And they would just be like, okay, we'll just put more water in the soup.
Yeah.
And we got bread, and the volume expands, and then we'll have something to eat. And
the dal and chavel has stretched that out for as many people as it
became
can.
super liquidy. And that's right. And the rice, and then they just had store-bought bread.
Sure. Was this Northern California or Southern California at the time?
This is all Philly. So this is like Jersey,
this is all Philly.
Okay. Yeah, so this is, my dad landed in California, but then ended up
going directly to Philly.
Yeah.
And how did he? So I guess, I'm sorry, I'm just obsessed with this kind of story and the history of it. But why Philly? So many Indians I know of, they've gone through Toronto and then they made their way to New York or what. But
I mean, they knew someone there, and then the guy that he was tagging along with, was I think he had a job.
Yeah.
Right. He had gone back to India to get married, so like he was going back to like his thing.
Yeah.
So like my dad was like, "Go wherever you're going." There was no plan. It wasn't like he was going to school, or he wasn't admitted anywhere. It was just like, I'm going to America.
Yeah. And you have this close-knit Indian community wherever you are, right? And Philadelphia is probably no different than Silicon Valley at that time, right? In 72.
It's got to be the same. There just weren't that many of them. I think they knew there were like 50 of them or something. Maybe there were more, but there just weren't that many, right? And so everyone knew everyone, and it was like a completely different world.
Were you the firstborn, and you're the first of two? Is that right?
I'm the first of two, so I have a younger sister.
First of two, younger sister. What's the age difference between your sister and you?
I want to say 6 years, 6 or
Okay.
7.
Wow, there's so many parallels, Bree. My sister is 8 years older than I am. She was 72 baby, born in Toronto, and then they had me when they went to California. Okay, so you're in your parents are in Philadelphia. What precipitated the move to Texas and then to Virginia?
So I was born in November.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked up the historical records, but according to my mom, it snowed 5 feet. And they couldn't even open the door to get out of the apartment. I think she's exaggerating. She's sort of.
No, never
exaggerating.
Come on.
But it snowed a lot. There's no question about that. And so after that experience, 6 months later, we moved to Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
To Alexandria. And then after a couple of years, we moved to Saudi Arabia. So I spent
Oh wow.
4 years. So at 4-ish, I moved to Saudi Arabia. I spent 4 years there.
Do you have any?
And I don't really,
memories?
you know what? I remember 2 things. So one is, I remember a couple more, but like two things stick out. One is they would kick us out of the country every 6 months for religious reasons, or we weren't citizens. So we ended up going to Europe a lot. So that, as a kid, that was like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I remember was we lived in an American compound on the Red Sea. And this is before all the terror. It was like a different world. It was like 1980.
Totally different time. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so my dad used to bootleg homemade wine.
Oh,
So we had a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom. I don't know, whatever. It was crazy. I don't know why we had so many bedrooms. And one of them was like, he had this setup where you take grape juice and yeast and make moonshine, or I don't know what it was.
What?
And it was in this, it was like, I don't want to say it was like a gated compound, but it was like, it was just like all Americans and English folks working on this Silicon project. And we'd have these parties. It was like, I was too young to, but like, people would show up with vats of goat curry. And then, like my dad would have a bucket.
There is literally nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. That's a Rogan Josh and things like that. And then on top of that, now you've got like this bootleg wine. And I'm imagining there were a lot of Indian kind of expats that are there all together doing this.
No one wanted to go to Saudi Arabia. So like a lot of Indian engineers from the US ended up in Saudi Arabia, because that's like a tough posting, right?
Absolutely.
Wife can't work, can't drive. All those things still were in play.
How did your mom deal with that?
It was just super social. And then my sister was born, so that kind of kept her busy. But I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
was
cool.
there?
So,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bree.
I was gonna say, you said some of your favorite memories were going to Europe. I'd love to know more about what that looked like as a kid and where you guys traveled. And it sounds like it was for long periods of time.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks. Honestly, like the only memory, and it's starting to fade, it's so long ago, is I remember running in Vienna and knocking over a kid that had a ton of chocolate. Like we were the same age, same height. And my parents were apoplectic. They were like, oh my God, we're in this country, you can't speak the language.
Yeah.
These grandparents just saw their kid get knocked down. And I just remember like eating chocolate on the bench.
Yeah.
That's the only remember all these trips to Europe.
I think my parents always want me to remember more than I did. And I don't know if you get this a lot, but you're the older one, right? In your situation, I'm the younger one in my situation. They continually confuse myself and Anjali. Oh, you were around for that. And I was like, no, I wasn't even born yet. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No idea. And then there are other times where it's Anjali I was like, no, that was me. And I remember my dad was obsessed and is obsessed with food, is always obsessed with food. And his big thing, you got to go to a 4 Michelin star restaurant in Italy. And he always reminds me, do you remember that food that we ate? And I feel like I'm breaking his heart every time he asks me, because I'm like, no, I don't remember. I literally do not remember. I remember every church that I went into, because my mom was big into, let's go into every church, every castle, we're doing it. But it was so funny.
I'll just say on that point, my parents will tell me all I ate was McDonald's when I was in Europe. It's like,
Yeah.
it was like French fries and that apple pie that was fried that you can't get in the US
come on.
anymore.
Yes, of
You can
course.
still get in
absolutely.
Germany and Sweden and other Japan,
Yeah.
but it's not baked. It's total nonsense.
No, it's total junk food, but it's the best, most amazing junk food ever.
It wasn't
Okay,
junk food in the 80s.
No, it wasn't junk food.
It was healthy.
Yeah, it had apples in it.
It had apples in it. Exactly. That's right.
There were fewer preservatives for sure.
It's European. No, it's organic.
But we didn't regard it as junk food, right? In the 80s,
No,
there was no concept of McDonald's as junk food in the 80s.
no. It was just food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a McDonald's order? I just want to know.
As a kid,
Yeah,
I
as a
mean,
kid.
I think I got the Happy Meal a lot.
Yeah.
I love the apple pie. I was a big
Yeah.
fries guy.
Okay.
The McDonald's fry, by the way, if you ever light it on fire, is actually really fun to watch because it'll wick.
Okay. So, couple of disclaimers. If you're listening or watching the show and you end up lighting McDonald's French fry on fire, if it leads to any kind of a larger fire, we're just dissolved or removed.
We're disclaiming any liability.
There's no disclaimer. This is the disclaimer, and don't do it, but do it. And
If
I
you,
don't know,
yeah,
I'm
you
gonna check it
could
out.
tag me so I can see it.
You know, link below, comments below, and show us what you did.
McDonald's
Anyway,
going to be
but
sponsoring this.
McDonald's is
This is
my
going to
big
go
thing is-
viral.
Yeah, my big thing was always chicken nuggets, and
Oh,
I
yeah,
had
those
to
guys.
double dip between sweet and sour sauce and barbecue sauce.
Oh yeah,
Had to,
Yeah.
absolutely. That was my
that's the
jam.
move. That's
And the mustard sauce. Actually, all three of them.
all of
Yeah.
them.
Triple dip at the same time. Go. Let's
Chicken
go.
nuggets, great. Fish
Yeah.
fillet, I was a big fan of.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah. That stayed with me also through college when we had a very small stipend and we were like, okay, we need to eat as much as possible. We're
Yeah.
going to go to McDonald's. So we did that. So now we've really gotten entirely off of track here with.
So I can
with
speed up.
McDonald's.
So
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, I was there for 4 years.
Yeah.
My parents then decided they wanted to move back to India, which was an absolute disaster.
Okay.
And
part?
say again?
What part of India did you guys? move
Oh,
from?
we moved back to my dad's hometown, which is it was a village, and now it's like a small city. And it was like 5,000 or 6,000 people when we moved back. It's probably 100,000 people now. Like it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
times have changed, but
It's still a small
didn't
city, by the way.
still a small city. Yeah. No,
Yeah, in
it's
India,
still, like,
that's
a small
tiny.
town.
Yeah.
But they only spoke Hindi. I didn't speak any Hindi really. I
Yeah.
understood it, and they put me in school. Didn't work out.
Yeah.
And then we went to a place called Chandigarh, Punjab. And my only memory there, and they say that my memory is flawed, but I think it's pretty close, is that they put me on a bus.
Mm.
I went to school. Everything was great. You know, it was in English, like the kids.
Yeah.
On the way back, I forgot where I lived.
Oh, shit.
And I was like, my parents must have written down the address somewhere. Nothing.
Oh, man.
I had no phone number, no address.
Oh,
I
man.
was in a country that I didn't really know, even though I'm Indian. And no one had phones, no cell phones. This is 1984.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
machine guns in every circles in the city. There are no corners.
Yeah.
Part
Yeah.
of the problem, but
Yeah.
it was crazy. I didn't get home till like midnight. It might have been 9 p.m. I don't.
Oh my
How
god,
I don't know
old
my
were
brother
you
liked
again?
It's been like first grade. So.
Oh, my God.
that's traumatizing. You're like 6.
Oh yeah, and so apparently, and this is what I remember. My dad thinks the story is a little different, but I refused to get back on the bus the next day. And my dad, you know where you live?
Of course.
Like what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Absolutely not forget. I'm like, so puts me on the bus physically, and then runs out of the bus, and then next stop I get off and I run back home. And that happens a couple days, but I don't actually go home because I'm scared of my dad. And
Yeah.
then my aunt looks out the window and is like, "Hey, Puran," his name is like, "Is that your son under the tree?" I'm like, past that. Yeah. Sometime shortly thereafter, we moved to Texas.
Wow.
Wow.
Does your dad believe in like tough love? Is he a tough love kind of guy? Like I guess I'm a mama's boy for sure. How did you?
Yeah, I would say I think my mom was like Yeah, I don't. It's interesting. Like when I got to Houston, maybe you can answer the question.
Yeah.
Like I actually hadn't gone to school for like almost 6 months to a year. It's not
Oh,
like I skipped a grade. We moved in the middle of first grade,
Yeah.
and so I'd forgotten everything. And so they put me in second grade because that's the natural progression.
Sure.
And I couldn't read. I can do any. I was like, and the principal's, your boy's slow. I think we're gonna have to hold him back.
Oh no.
And my dad's slow. We gotta hold him back. And my mom's, no way. Wait, he's being held back. Like,
Yeah.
And she worked her tail off for a year to like kind of catch me up.
Oh,
That was not
amazing.
a fun year. I will tell you that.
Yeah. You mentioned that your mom obviously wasn't allowed to work in Dubai. Did she end up ever working and
No.
finding a profession? No.
So she was a teacher before I was born.
Yeah.
And then I was born, then we moved. So she ended up staying as a homemaker.
Yeah. But she clearly taught you quite a bit and caught you
She
up.
did.
And I'm sure she was the force also behind your sister and her education as well, and like making sure she was on track. It's interesting. My mom also had this teacher background. Like she became a teacher during my upbringing, and I'm very proud of my mom. So, and I won't talk too much about it, but she ended up retiring a year ago now, and
Oh, wow.
as someone at Citibank, and she had worked her way up at Citibank, and it's incredible. And also, by the way, her work ethic would put all of us to shame, right? I think we can agree, like our parents, their work ethic is something that I wish that I aspired to, but I don't think there's any way that I get there, honestly.
But they had so many fewer distractions.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're a little bit older than me, but like our
Yeah.
TV in Houston had 2 channels.
Yeah.
And the knob came out, so you could even change the channel without a plier. Like the whole thing. I'm like, it had antenna. Like, no cable. What do you do? I don't even remember how people lived back then. Radio.
Yeah.
we just would watch the same video cassette over and over again. Like you would record it on
Yeah.
TV once we got VCRs, and then you're like,
Yeah.
yes, I got Grease. And then I would sit there and I would watch it over and over again until you had it memorized. And we don't have that with streaming anymore.
Okay, so this is funny. Okay, my sister was born in 72. I was born in 80. And I think we're all in the same age range, basically, at this point. We are in this really crazy world of remembering what it was like to be in this like non-technology dominated world, and then learning as you go from rotary phone to cell phone,
That's right.
the nuances of that. I remember fondly, and sometimes not so fondly. Like my dad saw like the first Spark systems, Sun Microsystems computers. He would get like the first Apple IIc, and when we got it, he would take it apart and have me be in the same room with him. And I remember being in the same room with him, but I don't remember the details of it. But he really immersed me in technology at a very early stage. Do you feel like, was that similar to you? What was your first experience with technology and with all this innovation that was happening around you at that time?
I'd say my dad's way more innovative than I am. And when I say innovative, like you have to like have a desire to try something new.
Yeah.
And you don't know if it's going to work or not.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of, and he would try like just about anything. And so
Sure.
I had an Apple II probably like when I was in kindergarten or first grade.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had it in Saudi Arabia. And I just played like Pac-Man on it. I had 16K of memory or something.
Yeah.
So I got involved like fairly early on, but it was my dad that was just like, hey, let's get the newest. Like he had the first cell phone like in our neighborhood. And it was like this beast. It was like this.
Yeah. He was a gadget
brick
guy.
from like Rambo. You know?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. He was the, gosh, Bree, who's the kid
The
from
guy with
Saved by the Bell?
Oh, Screech?
No, not Screech. The cool one. Zach Morris. He's like Zach Morris, where he's just like on the big ass brick of
I
a
mean,
cell
that
phone.
was like massive. You barely hold the back, man.
For sure. I was a big Saved by the Bell junkie. Like Kelly Kapowski was like my crush back in the day. So like your dad seemed like he was the gadget guy. And then do you feel like any of his curiosity or curiosity from your mom transferred over to you?
I would say not so much gadget guy as like just do new shit.
Yeah.
Like just
Okay.
optimistic, like whatever happens, like shit will generally work its way out.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was his attitude in life. That's why we
Yeah.
moved around so much. He was just
Sure.
like, yeah, we'll go to Texas. It'll be fine.
Yeah. I don't want to put the cart before the horse here a little bit, but do you consider yourself generally an optimist on most things as well? Or do you feel like, because VCs, I think most VCs that I know would very much consider themselves pessimists, and we've seen all of these failures, et cetera, et cetera. But and we'll get into the career
Oh, that's
aspect of it.
interesting. Yeah.
But do you feel like you've maintained that optimism and that outlook that he's had?
I'm probably more conservative than he is.
Okay.
To be like, I started my like non-entrepreneurial career in credit. So I was like a lender for a while. And as a lender, you get trained like what's the downside.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is there are a lot of folks in lending and fixed income that are optimistic and they think about the world and like creating shareholder value, just creating value in a different way. So I think you'd be optimistic as a lender, you'd be pessimistic as an equity investor.
Sure.
It's funny that you say that VCs are pessimistic because I've never been a VC, like a proper VC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like my assumption is that VCs are really optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I want to caveat this in a couple of ways. Number one, when we get behind a company that we really care about, we have conviction in, we invest in, I think there's a time and place to be optimistic and really look, there's a North Star. We're going to aim, we're going to hit it, right? But I think we're almost conditioned in all of this pattern matching that everyone says that we do, right? That, look, gosh, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's the people that can execute. And that almost kills this dreamer mentality of, yes, believe in every dreamer that's out there. You can't, because everyone's got an amazing idea. It's not about the idea. It's about, can you execute on that idea? I don't know. That's my caveat.
That's fair. That's fair.
I don't consider myself a pessimistic person at all.
Yeah.
I want to be optimistic. I want to believe in the good in everyone and the greatness and the optimizing for the potential and everything. But yeah, there's part of me that's, man, I've seen so much shit. And I'm like,
it's an interesting question because so we have a very different model. And I made this comment at dinner a while back. I probably said it like elsewhere. Like it almost feels to me like there's not enough investing in the next SpaceX of the world. I don't know whatever happened to the company that was like recreating the woolly mammoth. They were trying to they're taking the DNA.
yeah, I think they're still trying to do it.
And I'm like, that thing is, from my perspective, I'm like, that thing is either a zero
Yeah.
or it's like $1 trillion business because they're
For
going to
sure.
figure out
Yeah,
some
absolutely.
way of disease or manipulating DNA in a way that like Pfizer and Merck will never even, it won't even cross their mind because they're not solving such a hard problem.
Sure.
So from that perspective, it feels you either have to have a really crazy idea.
Yeah.
Or, and therefore then you need good talents, but you need like just a crazy idea. But like the less crazy the idea, the better the execution needs to be almost. But obviously that's not true. When you look at Elon Musk, and obviously he's got like insane, like SpaceX 20 years ago. Who thought like a private company make the space shuttle? The NASA's not be able to do it. Anyways.
Yeah, no, so look, it's interesting. I think this talent idea is a very good segue because your mom clearly caught you up. And she's like,
for my mom, I would have dropped out of school.
There you go. So mom, what's your mom's name?
Yeah. Savita.
So Savita clearly caught you up and you end up getting into Stanford undergrad and you're surrounded by a lot of talent in would have been 94, 95-ish time period through 98. Can you talk a little bit about going to undergrad in that space and being around the people that you were around? Because I imagine I'd almost bet $1 million that some of the greatest technologists of our time were your classmates during that period.
Oh yeah.
What was that like at Stanford? I have a different view, but I'm interested in yours.
It's one of those things. I think youth is wasted on people. If I could go back in time, I think my time at Stanford would be like very different. So like so to catch you up right before Stanford, we moved to Virginia.
Yeah.
My dad wanted to be an entrepreneur, like always. So he left civil engineering. He started a business in Texas,
Okay.
started a business in Virginia. And we went through some hard times, like starting the business. So I was like working for the business.
Wow.
And then yeah, he moved to Boston for a year while we were in Virginia, like just taking a job. So there were some lean times. We were like together. And so I got to Stanford. I actually didn't really know much about Stanford when I got there. Like I was thinking UVA, and then I knew like the East Coast schools. But Stanford had a good engineering program.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an engineer. And knowing what I know now, like I probably wouldn't have done engineering. So that's like the first thing that
What would you have done?
I probably would have stayed in liberal arts because like I enjoyed that the most, right? Like I enjoyed learning Japanese. I took a class on Nietzsche. There were so many other things that I wanted to learn about. Like my economics classes were so much fun.
Hold the phone. Were you fluent in Japanese?
By the time I left Japan, I was reading contracts in Japanese.
Wow.
Holy
like
shit.
In 2005.
Yeah. So 2 things that this brings up. Number one, I'm jealous because I really wish I had learned Japanese. My knowledge of Japanese language is very small. Second thing, how pissed off was your mom and your dad that you learned Japanese, but you didn't learn Hindi?
So I want to put this in context. I can understand Hindi, like no problem.
Okay.
Like they talk to me in Hindi, I understand it 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
talking is different though.
The issue is speaking.
Okay.
And what I learned in Japan was if you drink enough, you can speak.
and so, those are those 4 to 2 a.m. That's where you're.
Yeah. And so, and you learn the accents.
Sure.
And that's like really important for self-confidence, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to speak a language, now some people can just do it, like, and that's great. But for me, I don't want to say I was like perfect, but I feel like I had a decent accent.
Yeah.
In Japanese. And then I would just say random shit.
Yeah.
I would try things out. And I've got a 5-year-old daughter and she does the same thing. She'll just try words out. And sometimes it's word salad and sometimes it's a sentence.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's a sentence. Like, and sometimes I have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah.
And in my case, people are like, he's drunk.
Yeah.
Here, have some more beer.
Like,
stop.
But let's be honest. If you're reading contracts in Japanese, you're in rarefied air coming from.
It's a lot easier than English contracts. So,
okay.
Like in our contracts, 100 pages, every little thing. Their intent matters more. Much shorter contracts.
I see.
And the characters are all like very, like there aren't that many characters, right?
Yeah.
So you can figure it out. Like I couldn't read like a menu, for example, right? Because they had all sorts of like vegetables. I don't know, like 100 different mushrooms. Like I have no idea.
Yeah. So if you could do it all over again, you'd go into liberal arts, maybe you'd
100%.
study history, maybe you'd study philosophy, but electrical engineering, was that to appease dad and mom, or was it just?
No, I went in there and I said, I want to do the hardest thing here that I could do. And like engineering felt like it was really hard. It was like, if I said I could just read history on my own. And I think it was like, I just didn't have the experience that I have now, but yeah, that was the mentality. I was like, oh, I'm here. I should do something really hard. This is an expensive education. Yeah. I should get something out of it.
Man, now I feel really bad about what I did in college at Vassar, but good. Okay.
Why do you feel bad?
So in my opinion, I had gone from private high school in San Francisco, where I was already feeling displaced because we had moved from San Jose, Saratoga, which is 60 miles south of San Francisco, to then me leaving my friends in public school, elementary, to going to a private high school. And I met a lot of really close friends in high school, but I like to think that my middle school, elementary school friends were like, I was very tight. So all of a sudden I was like I wasn't introverted, but I was more introverted. I was still a little bit of a class clown. I still did that. But when I got to Vassar in New York, my concept of what I wanted to do and what my focus wasn't spending a lot of money for this education. And it wasn't Stanford. It was nearly Stanford money. It might've been pretty comparable, but I was more like, you know what? I'm just going to find myself again and recalibrate and hit the reset button again. And I did. I like to tell people, oh, I drank a lot, partied a lot, and did this, that. But it wasn't that. It wasn't that kind of recalibration. I think it was like a find myself, be the outgoing person that I was, play squash, be the squash captain, blah, blah, blah. But I was never, I have to say, it's a very weird feeling. And maybe I'm very different in that sense, but I honestly didn't think about what is my career going to be after college or whatever is next. And I feel, so that's kind of feeling like I have, I'm like,
but
man,
see, you and my sister are the exact
Yeah.
same. I wonder how Anjali
yeah.
approached her college education.
Anjali was a trailblazer in a lot of different ways. She's gonna, if she ever listens to this podcast, and she does occasionally, she will be horrified to hear this. But Anjali was a trailblazer and did everything wrong so that I could only do something that was right at that point in time. Right. And I was the son. Let's be honest with you.
It's easier.
The
It's
son
easier.
is so much easier in an
Is that
Indian
how it
family.
is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
seriously.
sister had she was the second, so she got
Yeah.
some stuff, but she had so much more shit thrown on her.
The latitude that we have as sons is crazy. Bree, I could have come back from school, stayed out until midnight, come home and maybe done work, and people would be like, "Oh, Baked Out, you're doing great." My mom doesn't talk like that. She goes, "You're fine. You're good." My dad, "You're good. You're fine." My sister, they were so strict with my sister, and she's smarter than me. She's more articulate than me. She's a better person than I am, and she had to deal with so much more stuff than I ever had to. And because she pushed the boundaries and pushed up against them, I was cleared to like
the box of this, she pushed it to there.
Exactly.
Broke the box.
Exactly. And then I was just like, what box? Fuck the box. I'm at Vassar. I'm thousands of miles away from you all. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. Right. Yeah. Okay. So you wish you would have had a liberal arts degree, but here you are, electrical engineering. You doubled down. I don't know if you took any time off in between Stanford and Georgia Institute of Technology. What was it like? Because that's in the heart of Atlanta, I want to say.
It is. Yeah.
And I guess my first question is, there aren't that many people that say, hey, I just graduated from Stanford in Silicon Valley, electrical engineering, and now I'm going to go to Atlanta. I know that you were in Virginia for a bit, and so maybe Atlanta, maybe.
I went to Georgia Tech. It was a crazy thing to do. As I look on it, but like 19, you were there. It was the same era.
Yeah.
Like everyone was starting a company in 97, 98.
Yeah.
I was a web developer. Like I was getting paid like a crazy amount of money to create like a 2-page website. Like in 1996, right? Like JavaScript, like nothing moved, all static. And I was like, yeah, I could go to Atlanta and I could find some engineers that would be a lot cheaper than the Bay Area. And I ended up starting, I met this guy in an elevator and he had just moved to Atlanta and we ended up starting Chutney Technologies. So I went to Atlanta, like had this vision, wasn't quite sure what I was doing in my life. Thought maybe like I could become a PhD student. Like this academic thing seemed okay. And then I met this guy. I was like, oh, perfect. Let's go start this business. And then, there was very little education in Atlanta. Like I graduated with, I think you needed like a 2 to graduate, and I probably graduated like a 2.01, which basically meant I could never go back to academia. Business school's out, law school's out. Like I was like, that's it.
Yeah, we're done. Yeah, that's crazy. Sorry, Bree. I might have. Look, I guess my question on Chutney Technologies is, what happened there?
We made so many mistakes.
Did you make mistakes?
Yeah.
I think in an interview that Bree and I were watching the other day, it was something like, oh, I failed real hard at Chutney Technologies. But then we look at the outcomes. Oh, it was acquired by Cisco.
But that was after like we ran out of money and Kleiner Perkins reorganized the company and I was like wiped out.
Yeah.
I went over to Japan. Like this guy, I take no credit for it. So I be like, I had no innovation on my part other than I met this guy in an elevator.
Yeah.
Started talking to him and I was like, hey, you have a really good idea. Let's do something. And his name is Ananda Datta. He's probably not going to watch this. He's gone on to do other things. I think he's the CEO of Mobile now. And he had developed a database that was faster than Oracle DB2 and Informix and whatever else you can imagine for certain kinds of OLAP queries. So there's two kinds of, there's like transaction processing and analytical processing, at least in 1998, maybe it's changed now. And his thing was just like, it blew everyone out of the water. It was so fast. And the issue back then, like we don't recognize it, but back then was that you didn't have virtual disks. So you had one disk.
Yeah.
And you actually had to place the data like you had strategically so that the head could read it like it was reading it twice. So like you couldn't index the hell out of a system because indexing creates like data expansion. This is probably in the weeds. And oh my God, the number of mistakes that we made. We were going to power Equifax's entire data warehouse at the time as the largest private database in the US.
Yeah.
Around the same time, Amazon bought a company that was doing vector-based personalization, which, by the way, if you look at LLMs, it's all like kind of vector-based AI, right? Like we were in the thick of it. And this comes back to LedgerX as well. It was some of my commentary there. I couldn't get the guy. I was like, I think we should move to California. Because like I'm the co-founder, but I'm like 22. Yeah. This guy, he was like assistant professor. He was like 28, 32, whatever. And he was like, no, why would I move? I've got like this job that's paying me a lot.
Sure.
And we got all these free PhD students. I was like, no, we need to move. We're onto something. And we couldn't close the circle.
Wow.
And Atlanta, I think very similar to St. Louis is my impression. But back then there were like 2 VCs.
Sure.
I mean,
that's probably more than St. Louis had at that time.
Yeah. There was like no one. And so we struck out. One of them was like, hey, put my buddy as CEO, give him 10%. We're like, no, this is crazy. I can't believe we hired a ex-Bear Stearns banker. Oh, no. Here's what happened. Equifax was going to give us $2 million. We're sitting at Morris Manning's office and they bail the day of closing.
Oh, wow.
So we're sitting in the office waiting for the check and they're like, we're not doing it. And the CTO, CIO is going to our investor meeting saying I've never seen anything this good.
Yeah.
And someone forgot to tell the CEO and he pulled the plug on the $2 million investment. Oh. So we hire a Bear Stearns banker. This is why I love founders. Like this is the optimist in me, right? So we're founders. We're like, we got to make this happen. This is this guy's life work. And he raises us money, $25,000 at a time. Like we had a PPM, like no one raises money like this, but I drafted a 60-page PPM. He took us to Alabama and I remember sitting in some billionaire's office, like the 3 of us. And you have to picture it. It's 2 Indian guys and this Jewish woman, whatever, we're all the same. And this guy, like for 30 minutes, is reading from the Bible. And we're sitting there, I don't know, and then there was like way smarter and had read more than I am. He's like nodding his head. I'm like, I have no idea. Like, and he gives us like $500,000. So we just like cobbled money together. Like it was just like a weird, crazy experience. And we were just like, we got to do this. And then we ran out. 2000 happened. Like everyone told us to burn. And I'm thinking about all these founders I'm meeting now. Everyone's burn all of it, raise more money. And so what did we? So we ended up raising like $6 million, right? Like $500,000 here, $25,000 there, $50,000 at the hospital. This guy's like dying. It was just like we did just crazy shit to raise money. It was a total waste of time. And then everyone told us to burn it, so we burned all of it, and then we ran out of money.
Wow.
But the fundamental issue is like we should have moved to California. Like there is a reason why big scale businesses are built in California, because people have seen the patterns, to your point, like venture. Just didn't know where to take the thing that we had. We had something. And I think we could have open sourced it. We could have gone into just event logging on servers, like alone was like Elasticsearch. That's like what they're built on. And we had technology. It was clearly better. Equifax approved it. And we absolutely botched the execution. Like everything that could have gone wrong, we screwed it up. That was an experience.
I like that you go back, and because so many founders will tell their story and it's like the hero's journey and they don't want to really highlight what they did wrong, but I like how you're so open and transparent with, what you could have done better and the would have, could have, should haves, but you still ended up with, to Vic's point earlier, you can say you were bought by Cisco and you may have not been there at that moment, but at least it's an exit.
I mean, it validated that the technology was worthwhile. I don't know what Cisco's done with it since.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there at the exit. It got reorganized, merged with another company. Like it was like a different thing by the time it was sold. But it taught me that I needed like some real experience. Like I remember talking to my dad and he's, you do not know what you're doing. You need like a real job.
Wow.
And my dad hadn't had a real job for 20 years either. For 20 years, like he couldn't teach me anything either. Like I love my dad, but he was like, yeah, I think he needs to get like a job.
Wow.
Interesting.
If you were to just give founders advice now based on your whole story of being a young first-time founder, what advice would you give?
Yeah.
I think you have to know who you are. Like I didn't pause. I first of all, I think like everyone should pause like at some point in their career, multiple times in their career.
Yeah.
If Lauren was on the podcast, I think she took a year off between high school and college. And so I think that served her. And I never paused. I was just charged, go.
Yeah.
This is a thing, go. And so I think you have to be real honest with who you are. And are you really the person that's going to make this happen? Do you have the things that you need? Like the experiences, the people around you, the resources. And I think if I was honest with myself, I wasn't ready. Like I just like, it was sexy. Everyone was doing it. I just came from California. But I clearly was not ready at that time. That's one. And then the other thing is one mistake that we made is, and I think it was born out of insecurity, was we had mentors that like wanted to help us. Like the CTO of Equifax. When you're 21, that's like a big thing. And
I think that's a big thing regardless age, right?
But
Yeah.
I mean, it's even bigger, right? Like it's
Yeah.
and then the other guy, and I haven't spoken to him, I don't know what happened to him, was a guy named Lang Lowry III. His family owned Memorex, a company called Anacomp. And this guy was like an older, senior advisor kind of person, used to golf with Lou Gerstner and the CEO of Delta. And so we were doing like Marsh McClellan, and he opened doors. We just didn't call these guys enough.
Yeah.
We didn't pick up the phone. I should have just picked up the phone and said, hey, Lang, I don't know what I'm doing. Can I come over and just chat? And I'm telling you, knowing what I know now, like he would have been like, hell yeah, come over. Let's pick it by the pool. We'll hang out for 6 hours. What do you need? And if I had asked that, he would have wanted to help even more.
I have to say, listeners, viewers, I think this idea that success is predicated on utilizing and leveraging your surrounding network more has never been more true than now, right? And equally so back when you were starting Chutney Technologies and going through the ringer on that. But shit, there are so many people, so many founders out there that I talk to, I know Bree talks to, or I'm sure you talk to, that one of the first steps is like, are you leveraging the people that are around you? And are you utilizing to the potential that you can, like the network that they have? Are you asking for help? How many times on this podcast, Bree, have we talked to people, and whether you're fundraising, whether you're building products, you're asking for feedback on the product that you've built, you're doing customer discovery, whatever. It's about asking for help.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to, at least in my case, like I was insecure. I was like, oh, I'm the founder. I need to know all the answers. If you don't know all the answers, you're going to look foolish. Like people will be like, how are you building this business? So I think I think coaching helps. Like I've seen founders that like really thrived, like just understanding like where the blockers were.
Yeah.
Like in them achieving success.
Yeah.
But yeah. You got to ask for help.
I wonder, just because knowing your career arc after doing research on you, do you feel like you have a chip on your shoulder from Chutney Technologies? And that was like one thing where you were like, man, if I was around for the reorg and if I was around to set things right, I could have done that. And maybe that's something that was a chip on your shoulder going forward in life.
I don't know if it's a chip on the shoulder in the sense of I got to prove these guys right. But I think back to what we had. We had a 9-figure valuation at one point. IBM wanted to buy the company. It was crazy
Yeah.
how terribly we botched this. And so it's not so much that I have a chip on my shoulder, but I think as I think about what we're doing at MBM, like just to talk a little bit of scroll forward,
Yeah.
I think my experience is not that unique.
Yeah.
Like I think there's so many interesting or clever ideas.
Yeah.
And for a variety of reasons, the team, the company has blinders on in terms of what they can do with the business, what they can do with the product, the technology.
Yeah.
And sometimes all it takes is like a different sales channel or there's just an insight, and that unlocks value. And for me,
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit about like solving puzzles. And so I think back to Chutney. I said, I think you need to know yourself and then you need to ask for help. So yeah, I could have known myself and still not ask for help and still have the same outcome. But I needed to go through like some of these experiences that I went through for me personally, just given like how I grew up and my background. But I feel with MBM, like we're on a mission to find chutneys that have like just great ideas.
Yeah.
And it's like pause. It doesn't have to be this like crazy unicorn or bust thing. Let's just figure out, let's be clever. Like, why do we need 140 people? Let's be clever. Like with 12 people, can we still get like a nice outcome and it's less stress? You don't have to manage this many people. Like, let's figure out the thing that will unlock revenue, right? Like it's like almost, I don't want to say it's a video game. I wasn't a huge video game player, but it's like an unlock, right? Like that's what we're looking for.
You need the cheat codes a little bit.
Yeah. And I feel like good VCs will provide that cheat code.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think they'll say, hey, go talk to this guy, and they'll provide some product feedback. And so it's a little bit of cheat code. It's a little bit of execution. And it's a little bit of timing. Right. I think a lot of times when we're seeing companies, the VCs have been in it for so long that they're just like, I can't spend time to do the
Yeah. Look, I'm going to speak to that a little bit. I think so often as an early stage VC, we try and provide a playbook or the blueprint for what we think is going to lead to the growth and that will get them to that next set of milestones, right? And pass them off to the next investors and go so and so forth. And honestly, if you have a portfolio of 10 companies, you can try and do that for every one of your portfolio companies, but there's always going to be something. Maybe the founder doesn't listen to you. Maybe the founder and there are pivots that happen, et cetera, et cetera. And this gets into the kind of the timeliness of this conversation and around MBM and your thesis. There are going to be, I think, let me step back and I'll say this, that oftentimes VCs realize that they end up spending more time with the companies that are less successful or that are having more difficulty than the companies that are really successful. They don't need the help. They don't need your advice. They don't need the mentorship, and they blast off great. But then you sit there with the majority of your portfolio, right? Because look, this is venture capital. We abide by power law dynamics. So you're going to have the majority of your portfolio where companies are going to stall and they're going to plateau, and no amount of advice that you've given them, because you are almost like a parent to them at this point, and they've tuned you out or they've decidedly moved in a different direction or whatever it might be. And then they look for funding because they're like, all right, we're out of runway and we need follow-on funding. And you look back at the VCs like myself and others, and like, look, the well's dried out, or we've doubled down in the more successful companies in our portfolio. We love what you do, love kind of the vision that you had, but I don't know, we can't take you any further. And that's, I think, where MBM comes into play, and this concept of looking for distressed startups with really good value propositions, right? With good businesses that are embedded in kind of these bad wrappers, like the bad facing businesses that they've come to be, right? And I guess the first question is, what is the distinguishing factor that you look at, or distinguishing factors, I should say, that you look at that differentiate a good company embedded in a bad company versus just a bad with bad, right?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack there. I think so. At a basic level, I think there are lots of good companies that are inside a bad wrapper.
Yeah.
And that wrapper can be the cap table, right? Like an unwieldy cap table, which is not anyone's fault, right? Like I go back to Chutney, we raised all this money, like the investment banker and the warrants and all this crazy stuff. But it really comes to at a certain point in the company's journey, especially on the venture path, existing investors are unable or unwilling to support the company anymore, to your point. And new investors are unwilling to put money in because maybe there are other things to do.
Yeah.
Right now, everything's AI, right? If you're like trying to raise a Series B for a consumer goods e-commerce company today, and that, like, you've got to be the best e-commerce business like ever,
right,
on your way to 100 billion in revenue. I think that would get funded, like with CAC that's zero, literally a unicorn, right? And so I think that, first of all, I think there are a lot of companies that are in that mold, right? Where whether they raised money in 2012 or 2018. And so in that universe of companies, which is a lot, I would say for us, like, there's certain things that we just don't know. So if I just start to think about, like, how are we qualifying opportunities? I don't know deep tech. I don't know how to create value in deep tech. I wouldn't know how to like deliver revenue there. And so there's some certain things that we're just like, we just don't know anything about them. So we'll push them off to the side. We're seeing some DevOps companies. Love the company. Sounds really interesting. I have no idea if there's another DevOps tool around the corner that is like taking off. So like we stay to areas that we know.
Yeah.
And so that like narrows the aperture, if you will, as we're looking at companies. We're generally fintech, HR tech, data SaaS. We'll do digital consumer, physical consumer, I think is like our consumer. So like within that space, then I think it's like a multivariate problem, right? Like what we're looking for are companies that have good unit economics, so like gross margins or really gross margins.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's totally fine if we're okay with tech-enabled services.
Yeah.
But most VCs are not, right? But
Oh, wow.
you have to know what you are.
Yeah.
Right? You can't be a tech-enabled services business and operate like you're a SaaS company.
Yeah.
Like tech-enabled services businesses are spread businesses, right? SaaS company is an operating leverage business. You got to figure out like what you are.
Sure.
Because otherwise you're just the business model won't make sense, right?
Yeah.
You're going to invest in the wrong things. So we're open to looking at either one of those, but we want to know that there's like a clear business model.
Yeah.
Consumers, customers, enterprise customers, they really like the product. And really what we're looking for is essentially that good product, bad execution.
Yeah.
That's that. And so good products for us is we look at product market fit based on revenue and retention. If it's like an enterprise product. And so if we can see that, we can say, wait a minute, like there's something there. Let's dig into the execution.
Yeah. Yeah.
And can we fix the execution, right? Like, can we, between me, my partner, folks that we can bring in this company, can we fix the execution? And I think there, then we start talking about like, how do we manage the founder management team? And how do we manage the existing investors, VCs that are in the cap table?
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to, for us, what's the vision for the company today?
Sure.
Not 3 years ago, right? 3 years ago, the TAM was $40 billion.
Yes.
And we're going to build all these products, go into all these new verticals. And I think like where we're coming in, we're like, it's a little bit, you guys are power law from a VC side, but it also is like a little bit of like, you're buying the rumor and selling the news. There's like a classic, that's a classic line in Silicon Valley where the guys, oh, we're going to have revenue. And I'm blanking on the scene, but the guy, the other guy's on the phone, he gets off the phone, we can't have revenue. Like, if you don't have revenue, you're pre-revenue.
Yeah.
As soon as you have revenue, like you'll never be able to meet the expectations of the valuation. And that's not always true, but like A lot of times it is. And so I think for us, as we're looking at opportunities, it's like being realistic that a company that is, let's say, 5 million of revenue, it's not going to grow to 100 million of revenue. Like that's actually really hard to do. Could it grow to 10 or 15? Yes.
Yeah.
If it grows to 10 or 15, it's probably more likely that a strategic will buy it.
Yeah.
If a strategic will buy it, maybe a financial buyer will show up and say, hey, we can take it from 15 to 50.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're creating exit liquidity. So like for us, we want to find businesses that we think we can sell the vision to the existing shareholders and to founders that, look, the original vision was a unicorn. Our vision now is we're going to sell it for $50 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the vision, or $100 million, like whatever the number is. And in order to sell it for 50 million, we think we need to have 15 million of revenue or 12 million of revenue, 30% EBITDA margins, free cash flow, whatever it is. And because that's what we're going for, and we can grow slowly, we don't have to grow 100% year over year. We can grow 30% year over year.
Sure.
That's going to mean a reimagining of how the company looks.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned before we started, do I need NetSuite? Do I need like these expensive things? We're looking at companies that, because of all the SaaS that's out there, like you've got payroll, and then you've got Amazon, and then you've got SaaS. And you look at all those three things, like the Amazon is probably like over-engineered.
Sure.
I'm not going to have Gmail level of concurrent users. And so like you can start to think about let's size for what the company should be.
Yeah.
And it's really, as we think about it, like in a different world, we'd be talking to bootstrapped founders.
Sure.
It didn't take any VC money.
Yeah.
And they would already be doing this. I'd be like, why do we need blah, blah, blah,
absolutely.
AWS? Like we could deal with a tenth of that.
That's right. That's right.
And so we're going the other way, right?
Yeah.
And that can be hard.
Yeah.
Not everyone can make that transition.
Right.
You're solving for operational inefficiencies and capital scarcities, right? And the way that I look at that, I think I'm 100% in on the investment thesis, right? Knowing that my portfolio, we're going to have companies that are going to stall out, they're going to plateau, and they're not going to reach that exit velocity that we all kind of hope for. Right? I wonder when the founders come to you. Do you feel like the founders do they come to you? Do the investors come to you and say, hey, take a look at our founders? Like, what does that process look like for deal flow for you?
So first of all, I'd say it's all of the above.
Yeah.
And I think Bree is going to start sending some deals.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Yes, she is.
I would say, so when we first started, there was one founder that I'd met in COVID. So we started early 21. And this was a phenomenal business that he built. They'd raised over $100 million. And they hired an investment bank to sell the business. It's a very common thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had, lots of revenue. And the investment bank couldn't do it, right? Like they had a guaranteed $4 million, whatever thing. I'm going to name the company because I want to name the investment bank. But I started talking to them, and I was at Klarna at the time, but I couldn't go to Sweden anymore. So I was like doing the LedgerX thing. And the bid was like, oh, we're going to sell it $200 million because that'll clear the prep stack. I was like, yeah, I don't know anyone who does valuation that way. But it's going to be irrelevant. Like what the other people paid years ago. That's just not how valuation works.
Yeah.
And so then they were like, okay, and then they brought it down. It was 100, then it was 40. And the company was running out of money. And we were talking with a founder who had been kicked out of the company. So this was the crazy story. It broke my heart. Yeah. The company was making money. They raised Series A, was still making money, like positive cash flow.
Yeah. Then
they raised a mega B round, and the investors brought in like a quote unquote proper CEO.
Yeah.
Paid him a lot of money, and they burned it to the ground. And so
yeah.
I think so. We were backing this guy. He was like, look, here where all the bodies are buried. Here's what I would do. We'd make it profitable in 6 months. Yeah. And I know who wanted to buy it 2 years ago. We just need to fix it, and then we'll sell it to those guys.
Sure.
And that was really like the start of MBM. My partner and I were at 1.0. It was a kind of quasi venture fund, venture studio. We had a unicorn. We had a bunch of dregs.
Yeah.
Me and my partner, Lauren, we worked on the dregs. I don't want to call them dregs. Worked on the companies that were not unicorns.
Yeah.
We sold one to Capital One,
Yeah.
like in 18 months or so.
There-
Phenomenal return for the partnership. Those guys started Ramp. So actually it was a great deal for them as well.
Yeah.
They built something, they sold it quickly. It was the future, it wasn't a product.
Yeah.
They went on to something new. And so talking back to deal flow, we started with founders just introducing us to other founders.
Yeah.
And it started with this one guy, and then he started introducing other people. And then some other founder was like, hey, like I'm stuck. So that's been like a great source of deal flow.
Yeah. Do you wish that the founders would come to you earlier?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Yeah. That's,
I guess you can tell when you're plateauing as a company, when you're coming up against and you're stalling, like I'm freezing right now as my video is happening.
really just find out. I mean, But here's what I would say to that is like in the life cycle of a company, and you got like portfolio companies and Bree, you've been around this. Like we talked about finding yourself like as individuals. Like companies need to find themselves as well when they're stalling out.
Yeah.
So if you think about a company, let's say they raised in 21, they were like $1 million and they raised like a mega seed or a series A, whatever the case may be. Now they're like 4 million. They did a bunch of things. The board's, hey, we'll bridge it or we're not going to bridge it, whatever. What are they going to do? This is what every company does.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, let's see if we can sell ourselves. And let's see if we can go raise money. If the existing and let's see if we can go get venture debt. So if we're in the equation, we're not like the preferred option at that point. Like people are not open to the idea. At the board level, they're like, oh, we raise venture debt and like you just need another 6 months and then this thing's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, and what ends up happening in that journey is that depending on the size of the company, you'll hire an investment bank or you'll hire like an advisor or like your CFO. If you have something will happen. You'll try to raise money. Companies are always raising money. So like pretty quickly you'll realize you can't raise money.
Yeah.
Not growing fast enough. And it's a catch-22. You don't have the money, so you can't invest in sales. So you need money to grow fast, but you're not growing fast, so you can't get the money.
That's right.
I sympathize with that. You then try to sell yourself, but a lot of companies that we're looking at, sub 5 million, sub 10 million, you're just too small for a strategic. It's just like strategics got their own problems. Like a $2 million business, they're like, we'll just build it ourselves. So like so many yeses that you have to get internally.
Yeah.
You're inevitably going to get a no, and it's going to be from someone that's, we can just build that. They only have 2 million in revenue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like the sponsors can't even, if it's a public company, as advising a bunch of public companies, they can't even go to their investor day and say, hey, we bought this company and it's going to generate $200 million in revenue. But if it's like 10, 15, 20 million, then they can say, hey, we bought this thing, we can grow it to. So you need to be of like a certain size. Oftentimes, maybe if you're like some amazing AI company or have some whiz bang tech, Chutney would have been a good example. Companies just they don't have like scale.
Yeah.
So the sale process doesn't work, but like people will try that.
Yeah.
And so we come in generally around that point in time where some capital markets activities have been undertaken and there's no success or there's like kind of limited success. From just one last thing, like a lot of lenders calls.
Oh, really?
So venture lenders, right? Like they've lent money. If you think about the old style of venture lending, it was like, we're lending, we've got a great equity sponsor. Obviously, they're going to support the business.
Yeah.
That landscape has changed. And some lenders are being proactive and saying, hey, I think we're going to have a problem. I think the sponsors have already said they're not putting more money in. And so we're like, hey, we'll take a look at it. We tell everyone, like, especially we'll tell founders this, we tell lenders this.
Yeah.
The sooner we can look at something, the more we can start to think about, hey, do we have insight? Do we have relationships that we can start to talk to? Think about what is the unblock here? What if we invested? What's the thesis? Because inevitably our thesis is not, let's put money in, recap it, and then do the exact same thing that people have been doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why would that work?
I want to go to the first gift. I actually wanted to do it way back, but we're going to pull it out now. So in front of you, they're both should be labeled. Open the one with the E on it.
By the way, this has been meticulously wrapped.
I know. This is impressive.
Using, I think, a very DrinksWithAVC inspired wrapper, Wrapping.
I love the wrapping paper.
Yo, what is it?
Well, you had mentioned earlier you love solving puzzles. And so this is a 3D puzzle of an elephant I saw that goes on your wall. I thought that was so cool. It's
I want one of those.
This is fun.
yeah.
That's super cool.
Super cool.
Hopefully it does say it's difficult. So it shouldn't be easy. So you can whip that out and spend some time with it. But I thought it looked really cool. So
I'm not very smart, and I'm definitely not as smart as I used to be. I will need help.
I think you're going to be just fine. I think I would guard against bringing it home and putting it in front of your 5-year-old. I feel like that leads to only bad things at that point. But
That's fair. That's fair.
but maybe just do this. This is your like in between calls. You've got 5 minutes, little by
love it.
little, and then maybe in a year's time, right behind you,
yeah.
and that wall. You're gonna see
The next time we do this, next time you see me on Zoom, it's going to be like right there.
I think it's because Bree knows your love of puzzles, and then I, master of segues, wants to bring about this concept of solving a puzzle is a little bit like solving a turnaround situation, right? It's interesting because just to pick up on the last piece of what you talked about, right? It's so unique. Every situation is so unique, and you were talking about how the lenders themselves have been reaching out to you, and I imagine when they bring you back and they introduce Arun and Lauren and the rest of the MBM team to a potential founder or founders, that there's some resistance, there's some pushback sometimes, but maybe there's also just a lot of excitement, and the pushback comes from the board and the VCs. I'm really interested in learning that dynamic between and how you might have had to navigate through some difficult founder conversations. And then honestly, how you navigate with the VCs that are existing, that they clearly don't want the company to tank. A little bit of something is much better than nothing of nothing, right? What is that conversation like? How does that come about?
I would say, so first of all, we've had the entire spectrum of conversations, right? Like from, delusional to like acceptance, right? Everything in between. And I think what's like really interesting in VC is that if you're successful in VC, meaning like you raise money and then you can actually get an exit and generate returns for yourself and your VCs, and there's nothing like it. Like it's phenomenal capital. Like obviously it works in this like power law, placing lots of bets and then doubling down. But for the founders for whom it works, VC is the best thing ever.
Yeah, it's life-changing.
There's nothing like it. You raise a Series A, raise $20 million and only sell 15% of your company or whatever, and like one board seat. Like you have total control of whatever you want to do, like whoever you want to hire. You almost no governance. So I think so like most founders, that's the only world that they know.
Yeah.
There's so much content.
Yeah.
And podcasting around, hey, like how do you raise UB and what are the metrics so no one really talks about like how the rest of the world really lives.
Yeah.
Which is private equity. So if you have venture on one side, you have private equity on the other side. And there are a lot of guys that they start search funds, or they're like, I'm an independent sponsor and I want to go buy this business. And this guy started in the 70s and he does like water testing with the EPA. And I could buy it for 2 times cash flow because the guy just wants to retire. He's 80 years old.
Sure.
And that you raise money and you end up only owning 20% of the business, and you have a capital partner, and that partner, if things are not going well, like they're going to step in, right? Like it's not, hey, here's like free reins.
Yeah.
And that's like how a lot of the world works, right? That's how VC works.
Yeah,
LPs
absolutely.
give us money, give you money, and then we're like, hey, we get 20% of the ups.
Yeah.
Right? We have like guardrails and you got to audit things. And so I think for founders, like the first big shock is that we're control investors.
Yeah.
So they got to get their minds around that.
Yeah.
But the reality is if they're looking to sell their business.
So hold on, let's pause
it's
there.
It's going to be the same. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about control investors for our audience and our listeners out there. I think it's important to acknowledge what you mean by that. What does that bring with it? What's the baggage that comes with that?
So for us, it really is, it's less about structure and ownership.
Yeah.
Certainly those things play into an investment. And it's more about the ability to hold teams accountable.
Okay.
And like, if a founder is not performing or someone on the management team is not performing, like we need to be able to make changes. And so like that for like early stage companies is like a very new thing. Because they
Absolutely.
might still have control of the board. And like the reality is if they have 7 investors that each own, as an example, like 5% of the company or 10% of the company, like who's going to take the time to step in and say, hey, we need to replace the head of products, or we need to replace the head. Like no one's going to do that. Like they're going to look around the table and say someone else do it.
Yeah.
So that's a difference. I think the other difference is we are generally recap investors. So like the way that every situation is different, right? We can lend, we're agnostic to like how we come into the company.
Yeah.
But generally what we're doing is we're saying, look, here's what you've done before, and here's the cap table and all this stuff. Let's take a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
Let's move the business here and let's recapitalize it. $5 million or $3 million or whatever. And then how much of that cap table should go to existing investors? How much of that goes to the management team and founders? And the reality is like most companies have raised too much money.
Yep.
With liquidation prefs that are like 1x, 2x, 3x. So the common has effectively been wiped out for many companies.
Yeah.
The founder might say, I own 40%, but you got to cover the like pref. You don't really own 40%. You own 40% if you get to this point. And so we're generally re-equitizing the team. I don't want to run the business.
Sure.
I've been in an operator role. Lauren's been in an operator role. And so like, that's the puzzle, right? What we're saying is it's fresh capital. So the founder was saying, look, it's fresh capital. You're going to own a big chunk at a lower basis because if we only put 3 million in, that's like now.
Yeah.
And if we sell it for 35 million, like you'll fully vest on a sale. Like it's not going to be like you could buy a yacht.
Yeah.
You buy a house and a summer house, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever you think. Like it's still a very good outcome for 5-10 years of effort in a business.
Look, given that, I'm on board with accountability. I like that. Yeah, as a VC, accountability is a good thing. I think it's necessary. I want to touch on LedgerX and your very minuscule touch point with SBF and FTX, but we'll get into that later. When we're talking about accountability, I'm all for it. I think it's necessary. I think employing some sort of guardrails for the founding team and as they grow and holding them to what they say they're going to do is a good thing. The recap thing, VCs are probably like, oh shit, okay, we're recapping this company. Is it like 100% of the companies that you work with is a recap? And then how much of a recap are we talking?
Yeah, I think
everything's unique. I get
everything's unique, but I think the best way to describe it is with like kind of numbers, right? Like hypothetical numbers. So a company that's raised $10 million, let's say, I don't know, like maybe the last round was 5 million on 20, kind of seems like a reasonable 5 on 25, 5 on 15.
Yeah.
But they raised 10 million. That's the lick pref. Maybe the lick pref is 15 because some investor came in with 2x.
Sure.
Like the company's not, if we were to come in, so just as an example, let's say that we were to come in and say, okay, we'll put in 5 on the post money let's say it was 5 on 20. So we come in 5 on 25. So now it's like post money at 30.
Yeah.
No recap, nothing. Everything stays the same.
Yeah.
To get to a 5x return, let's say that's like a minimum bogey. That seems like a reasonable bogey. Yeah. 5 to 10x, we're taking risks. So, this is not private equity, right? Otherwise I'd just buy home care companies in Arizona, right? 3 times cash flow.
Sure.
$150 million exit.
Yeah.
Means what, right? I don't know. Like that company's got to be pretty big, right? Like 20, 25 million in revenue. Yeah. Probably 30 million in revenue, like 5 times, like most of these companies are not going to get there.
Yeah.
Like our 5 million is not going to get there. I would do that deal if I could say that's the clearing price and it's crystal clear that we do A and B and we're going to get to 150, right?
Yeah.
Most of these companies we might get lucky. So I'm not underwriting to luck.
Mhm.
right? I'm underwriting to 8 to 10 times cash flow is
Okay.
my exit.
Yeah.
Could do better, of course.
Yeah.
So, like the math just doesn't work for the prior evaluations.
Yeah.
Generally, I'm
That's
not saying
true.
all the time.
That's
I know
true.
you're saying on the side. So,
Yeah.
so what we're saying to venture funds is the following. Like this has been the conversation. Is for those that have board seats.
Yeah.
Like this is a time suck.
Yeah.
Absolute time suck.
100%.
Companies are like not making payroll. They're going to miss payroll in a month. Like you're having Sunday calls. This is not a place that you want to be. And because you can't put money in to solve it.
Yeah.
And you can't solve it operationally. Like it's just like a really bad board call to be on. And then
Yeah.
you're going to have one 3 days later. Because so like nothing changes. People are like, are there any new ideas? And now we have 3 days less to D-Day. So like the pitch to VCs is this, that like in a recap, the valuation actually doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Of course it does, but it doesn't, right? Just VC valuations don't matter.
Absolutely.
VCs come in, I've got liquidation pref, 5 on 25. Like no one would buy the company for 25 million today. So the 25 is just made up.
Yeah.
So the same thing applies in a recap.
Sure.
What matters is what percentage ownership do the VCs have in the recapped business.
Yeah.
Now, there might be other issues like how they deal with marks and whether they can manage fees and all sorts of other stuff that are like non-economic. But if you put all that aside, the only thing that should matter is, am I getting time back?
Yeah.
Talk in my book. Hey, am I getting time back? And what percentage ownership do I have of this recapped company? Right.
Yeah.
Which may obviously be like at a much lower value. It could be worth like $1 million, but you own 20% of it, as an example.
Right.
Now, if we sell it for 50, you just made $10 million.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of a recovery play. If the VC's opinion of the company is, no, this is not a recovery play, this thing could still be like a $500 million exit, then generally we're not in the deal. Because if that's the case, then they should raise 5 on 25 from a new investor.
Sure.
Or because that, like, if that potential is there and they can articulate it and the team is in place that can execute it, then go do that.
Yeah.
Oftentimes what we're seeing is that companies that are coming to us, there's the lights.
There was a light change that we were looking for. You're fine though. You're okay.
No, it's
the office light.
It's like the light sensor right here.
It's time to go home and hang out with your 5-year-old.
I think like what we're seeing is companies just generally, like whether they're opportunities for us or not, they're not making cuts fast enough. Like they're not saying, oh my God, we're no longer a VC company. We need to now think like we're bootstrapped. Part of that is what we're seeing is that boards are saying, we got to keep the team intact. We got to, otherwise strategics won't buy. Like there's a little bit of
perception.
We're spending money to dress it up.
Yeah.
To get to an exit.
Yeah.
Or raise more money. But that's a gamble, right? Because you're burning runway to get there. So,
by the way, does anyone use the putting lipstick on a pig metaphor anymore?
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Okay. So you're putting lipstick on a pig, right?
Yeah. But you could like cut those expenses, shrink it down.
Sure.
But generally like VCs will have 1 or 2 reactions coming back to like, how do we talk to VCs?
Yeah.
They'll be like, this is absolutely crazy. Or we need to think about it. And so that's like pretty straightforward. When they're thinking about it, like they're thinking about, should I do the deal?
Yeah.
Right? We're outside. We're not on the cap table. We don't sit on the board.
Yeah.
Or do we have an alternative?
Sure.
Right? And what we argue to them is, look, if you do the deal, I'm not saying you personally, but like you, if you do the deal, if you're not prepared to spend time to fix the problems and actually realize the value, like why is it going to be a different outcome? Like you're just kicking the can down the road and you're putting more money.
Yeah.
So what's going to change? And, if they're like, we can sell it and we have the strategic buyer, like, we've seen a lot of these. The strategic buyers are like not buying businesses. And if they are, it's an acqui-hire.
Yeah. It's pennies on the dollar.
It's pennies on the dollar. So we kind of show the math saying, okay, like you can wash your hands of it, crystallize the loss, and that might be good for your LPs. They can take an NOL or whatever. Or like you can do this and we're only doing 1 or 2 deals a year. I don't have time to do 5 or 10 deals a year. So like the deals that we're doing, like we're all in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so underwrite us. You like the business originally. We think we can get it from 5 to 10.
Yeah.
And we think in 2027, the markets will open up and here's the business plan.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions. To your point that you just made, the mindset you had getting here, which was spend, is not going to be the mindset moving forward. You're going to have to start thinking like a bootstrap founder. So how do you determine whether that founder or the team that you're going to be working with is going to be able to transition to that type of mindset? And then what advice would you give for founders right now who are maybe overspending and need to start cutting costs?
I think so. We're pretty transparent in terms of how we operate. Like there's no gotcha. Like we're like, look, we're willing to burn. We want to see a path to profitability, and it's not just words.
Yeah.
We will get a path to profitability. If you want to work with us, that's what you're signing up. And we're crystal clear. It's in the term sheets. It's in the discussions. We think about modeling at a time and saying, hey, here's how we see the business. We don't give away all our secret sauce. If we have, hey, I know you could do this, we're like, okay, let's close the deal before we share that. But generally, we're pretty transparent about like how we operate. And every founder, they're like, we want references. They can talk to folks and say, how do these guys operate? What do they do? Some founders can make the transition, but it is absolutely not an easy one. It's not just the founders.
Yeah.
It's like the entire team. Like they're used to like having this SaaS tool and that tool and like this thing. And like you have to, it's a culture shift, right? It's real culture shift, change management. Some people are up for it and some people are not.
Yeah.
We would like to work with folks that are up for it, but you actually don't know until you start making the changes and start to see the culture change. Generally, like in these businesses, like I said, we're looking for a product that's working. Broken execution. A lot of times a broken execution is a go-to-market. And so a lot of the changes in the early days are like, how do we fix a go-to-market team, especially with product and engineering-led founders?
Yeah.
That may not know what good looks like from an account executive, account manager, like a VP of sales. And that's something that like we've turned over like a dozen plus times.
Sure.
Certainly my partner has. I would say that's like her superpower is getting in there and like really holding people accountable.
Yeah.
She's ex-Bridgewater, so Ray Dalio drilled this into her. Not everyone can take that level of transparency. Like we tell folks, we'll invest. We're going to be speaking to the management team once a week for 3 months, 4 months. We're in there. We're looking at the KPIs. We're like, hey, this guy's not performing. Why is he still there? What's the plan? How do we get him to perform? What's the issue? What are the roadblocks?
Yeah.
So it is definitely not here's money. We agree on the plan. Let's talk in 3 months.
So I want to jump into something. When you talk to LPs out there, 55% of funds return less than 1x. And as emerging managers, it's a sobering thought, right? As emerging managers, regardless of how many years of investment experience we have, it's still not going to be beyond we're never going to be called experienced managers until fund 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. As emerging managers, you look at this landscape in front of you, and I think we all aim to be, if you're just aiming, I heard shout out to Claire Kinlaw and then folks at Invest Midwest. They put on a great event, but at this event, I was having a conversation with a venture capitalist, emerging manager. The emerging manager was saying, all these emerging managers talking about a 2 to 5x multiple, they just have venture wrong. In venture, we're aiming for so much higher, right? And it's hard to disagree with that. I hope, and every investment that we make, we hope is going to the moon, right? We want to hit the home run. But in this day and age, and where we're at, suddenly the 2 to 5x, the base hits, the doubles, the triples, quadruples don't look so bad.
Yeah.
And I imagine there's more alignment than ever before with early stage investors that have seen a company kind of rocket ship and then all of a sudden hit a speed bump and they fall out of that trajectory. Do you feel like, have you sensed that? Is that something that you've seen now more than ever? They're more open to.
I think this has been a really hard fundraising environment for us.
Yeah.
I think for the industry in general, like not just us, we have a unique strategy. Like when we go institutional, we're not venture, we're not private equity. And so you have to fit in a box. So I think that's something that we've dealt with. We're special situations, but special sits generally is fixed income that long duration equity. So we've navigated that, and we found investors that are like super supportive. We've got a pension plan and a bunch of foundations. I think, and I take no credit for this. Someone on Twitter or LinkedIn, I wish I could attribute this, but the point that this person was making is that interest rates, the risk-free rate is 5%.
Yep.
So if you were to commit $1 million to a venture fund or our fund or any fund, or you put that in a CD with JP Morgan or whatever, Vanguard Treasury Fund or whatever, in 6 or 7 years, you'll be at a 1.8x.
Yeah.
And like 5% compounding over 8 years. So like the hurdle is not 1 anymore. The hurdle is like 1.8x.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so coming back to my fixed income days, like when the spread was on 1, it was like, okay, but now the spread is on 1.8 as in terms of what you have to deliver at the fund level, right? Because like we're investing in securities of different companies. Our LPs are investing in securities of different funds, right? And so they're looking at your fund, they're looking at my fund and saying, hey, this is LP is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
And then putting together portfolios. That return hurdle has just gone up.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I think I was at a venture debt conference in March. I was stunned. Like venture debt is humming.
Yeah.
I think there were like 600, 900 venture debt lenders, and they're like, it's a huge part of it. I thought with SVB, like huge contraction. No, it's like bigger than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you've got all these ex-SVBers going to other banks and being able to start venture debt practices. And now they have all the institutional knowledge from SVB to be able to take that risk on. So now you've got 12 new banks from one. It was definitely not what I expected, but they are still struggling in terms of just from my chats with them. They're still struggling a little bit with just getting the founders' attention because now there's 12, like there's all these other banks. So they're competing even more.
The cost of capital will go down. I mean, it's a currents coupon if you know what you're doing. So I think equity is now competing with debts.
Yep.
And if venture lending is, I don't know what it is, 15% with more, like some kickers or whatever, and maybe they sidecar some equity when things are really going, like they have some warrants or something. Like the hurdle rate has just gone up, right?
Sure.
And I don't know what that means for venture. I don't know if it's the doubles are starting to look really good, like you just take less risk, but like you're more certain with a double, or it means that you need to take more risk, or like valuations have to come down, right? Like the 5 on 80, 5 on 25, 5 on 15 has got to be like 5 on 10, right? Like,
and maybe
something's got to compress, right? Somewhere.
And look, maybe it's a mix of a lot of the things that you just said, right? I'm not changing my portfolio construction based on, how I think things are going to. I'm pretty confident in. Okay, look, I'm going to invest in X number of companies, and we expect this amount of return, and from X number of companies, et cetera, whatever. But my feeling is that just as on the human level of working with these companies that we've put money into, we want to see these founders succeed. And you're right. There are a lot of situations where this is going to be a write-off. And hey, just marking down a company entirely from where we lifted off to. But then there are going to be instances where we see it. There is a real product there. And any outcome that is better than the one that we're currently getting, that the market's currently yielding, is going to be a good one. But even more than that, just seeing the product and the service get to where we think it can go is so like that concept. I feel like maybe I'm taking crazy pills, but for me, that's why I invest in companies, because I see the product, I see the product market fit. I see that this could really change and be disruptive in the respective industry or whatever it might be. And for me, when I see a company struggle or stall out, and then a firm like MBM could come in and be really beneficial, I'm willing to take a step back, take a hit on ownership, and see if MBM can inspire and light a fire underneath the current founding team and get them to some level. So look, all this is to say is I wonder if there isn't ever a time where if there was ever any stronger kind of alignment there, right, between
Yeah.
firms on that front. What it comes down to, in my opinion, is, like you said, when we talk about ownership, et cetera, it's all about expectations
Yes.
and dealing and managing expectations. And it feels like when MBM comes in, Arun and Lauren and the rest of their team, you're walking in maybe like the Avengers in that slow motion scene. I vision it. And you come in and you're like, all right, this is how we're going to lay it out. But I think at the end of the day, you're trying to be a force for good. I got to say, for people that aren't marketers, there's one line that I really liked on your website. I'm going to try and look it up here. See if I can look it up.
I haven't looked at the website in a while, so
We're getting there. We're getting there. Again, your comeback story starts here. Creative capital for venture-backed businesses from partners who value companies differently. And I think the comeback story is something that we started this conversation with me being very pessimistic, right? You being optimistic about these things. I think maybe the story of 2024, 2025 is not going to be how many companies joined the Deadpool, but it's how many companies were able to survive and revive themselves and come back. And I'd hope that's going to be the case.
I think I don't have those. I posted on LinkedIn a while back, but there's something called the .com project. And I think it was like an academic study. Anyway, they looked at all the companies that have been funded from 96 to 2000, 2001, something like that, whatever. And they said, like, how many of these companies survived? And it was a much larger percentage than I would have expected. Something like 55% of the companies survived. Like, it was a much greater percentage, even in that bubble. And you had guys selling socks online, spending millions of dollars on Spark stations and Solaris and all that stuff. So I think these companies are really resilient. Like, the one thing that let's say we don't do a lot of deals, and it's not because we think companies are bad. It might just be the wrong fit, the wrong cultural fit for us, or we feel like, wow, this is a great product, we like it, but we just don't know what we would do different.
Yeah.
Like where we would add value. But the one thing that I've noticed is these companies are really resilient. There is a cockroach mentality to these companies.
Yeah.
And I say that with like admiration and awe. Like, these are survivors. They raise capital. That's not easy to do. Even in a boom market, like, it's not easy to do. You got to put yourself out there. You don't have product.
Yeah.
And generally you're like, I would say I'm an optimist. Like, I see a company and I'm like, oh, we could do this, that, and the other thing. And then we drill into it. I think it does come down to execution.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to expectations. If you're building a unicorn, you raise $20 million, you got to basically be a mini VC fund at the corporate level and make lots of bets. $2 million in a new product, $4 million in a new channel. That's the only way that you can create the variance to get to unicorn status.
Yeah.
And so that's why you need all those expenses. It's like the smart thing to do, right? Like, just venture funds are taking the power law approach. Like, the owners of these businesses that are raising all this capital almost have to take a power law approach to capital allocation and say, we have to burn.
Yeah.
And we have to take these bets. Now, one could debate whether they're taking the right bets, but, some people do and some people don't. Like, Stripe made the right bets. There were probably 100 other payment companies at the time Stripe was formed, and they took the wrong bets, or they had the wrong people, right? So, but by the time we come in, like, the time for bets are over.
Yeah.
It's, hey, this one thing is working. Let's stop doing all this other stuff.
Yeah.
We're changing the expectations. Therefore, the operating model has to change. If those things can align with the team, I think we can have good outcomes.
Yeah.
But it's, like, that's the challenge. Like, that's, like, when things go wrong, like, it's misaligned. It's true in VC. It's true in what we do.
Yeah.
But if we can create that alignment, like, we're excited, founders excited, managing team's excited, the team is excited, and hopefully the existing investors, right? Like, the prior investors excited, and it could be a good outcome.
I could literally talk about this forever, by the way, just because you're the only VC talking about turnaround. And by the way, I also think You are the first of many firms that will come out. I feel like you literally are on the ground floor. I was just talking to a friend of mine from Hollywood where I was saying how like the movie industry and the startup industry are so similar, but we haven't really created this ecosystem that on the production side, if you will, that takes care of the full life cycle of a startup.
Yeah.
And so when you look at like how a movie's made, there are all these different producers as part of the line of how the movie gets made. And the people at the beginning aren't the people at the end. The editors and the actors are totally different people. And so you're like the editors coming in and like taking this big thing and creating something actually meaningful out of it. So I love that you're bringing in this new process into VC that could be the ground floor for something really new in the industry. That's a necessary part of the ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would just add like one thing. I spent a lot of time, like I used to meditate. I used to have a meditation practice. I don't have anymore. I don't have enough time, but I'd like to go back to it. But like, Bree, to what you were saying, it's the worst feeling in the world when you feel, whether you're a founder or you're in like a bad job or whatever, and you feel like you're boxed in.
Yeah.
And I think when we've been on podcasts or we did a small event with a group here in New York, like our pitch to founders is like beyond like what we're doing is there are always options. Don't feel like you're boxed in. And I feel like this alternative capital, right? It's a recap. It's a down round. There's like stigmas to this, right? Like it's like negative in VC land.
Yeah.
Maybe that's changing. But like I used to run a public company. I ran a public company for 3 years, did all the K's and Q's and proxy fights. And like in a public company, stock price goes up, stock price goes down. You need money. You look at it and say, hey, if we raise this money, we're going to deploy it here and it'll have a good shareholder return.
Yeah.
And then you just raise money. There's no such thing as a down round in the public markets. It's just financing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it just happens. And same thing with like private equity. It's just, I don't know, 95% of businesses are funded by family offices, lower middle market. These small businesses that are like family run, bootstrap, they get sold to like other private equity firms and they bring in management, same management transition over. And it really is not that alien. But like what we're doing, and not just us, but there are others and like kind of the broader idea is absolutely alien to like the venture community. And I'm not talking about the venture funds, but like the founders, right? Like the teams, the management teams. And what's stunning about it is that our first backer, very first guy, we spoke to 300 people and everyone laughed at us. They were like, I don't know what you're doing. You should start a fintech venture fund investing in Series C. This is 2021.
This is 2021. So
I like, I don't know how you're going to make money.
Why are you investing in blockchain?
Yeah, you should
talk to me about this. Why are you investing in blockchain? Yeah.
And this guy, David Nuremberg, bless his heart, he's such an amazing guy. He was the first employee, I think, or one of the first employees at MBM Capital in the 70s. And he did exactly what we were doing when he was at GE Capital, which used to be a big venture fund in the 80s.
Yeah.
With Tom Perkins at Kleiner Perkins.
Yeah. Yeah.
And his first turnaround was the first IPO in 87 after the market crash. And so what we're doing, we believe this is not a moment in time. Like we get asked a lot, oh yeah, it's a moment in time, like 21, 22. No, like the venture industry is like 100x or 1,000x bigger than what it used to be.
Yeah.
Every year, I used to have these stats down when I was fundraising. We'll be fundraising soon, but not right now. Like, I don't know, 5,000 companies get printed a year. If only 5% of them make it to the promised land,
right,
that's 4,500 companies a year.
Right.
5 years from now, we'll need an alternative capital exit. If VC is investing on the venture, like we are incrementally increasing returns.
Yeah,
for LPs and venture funds.
Well, that's exactly right.
And so what we're doing, whether like we become like the brand, like there are others that are doing this. So I don't want to say like we're the guys.
Yeah.
Though we are pretty good. Please call us. Like this has to be part of the ecosystem. This is like now $100 billion a year that's being invested. Capital. There's no other capital markets product, whether it's commercial, real estate debt, resi, consumer loans, that doesn't have some value maximization strategies and investors when things don't go the way that everyone wanted them to go.
Yeah.
Right? Like lenders expect everything to go up and they're going to get their principal and interest back, but sometimes things go bad.
I have to say, I didn't have a negative opinion of this thesis, but I'm so much even more excited about your thesis after talking to you about this. And the reality, and I think someone brought this up in an interview that you did recently. Maybe it was that event that you were talking about, right? Where it was like 10% of companies that raised their Series A in 2022 have been able to raise their Series B in 2024 in this 2-year period.
Yeah.
And you think about that and it's like, let that settle in. I don't think it's that all these VCs are bad at their job and they're just funding really bad companies. I think I think a lot of people are bad at their jobs, but that's fine. That's okay. But I think there are a lot of great companies with amazing value propositions that are disrupting things, but that expectations and alignment weren't there and really took them out of the ballgame of receiving future financing through those typical sources of finances. And now it's like this alternative market is not just a lifeline, but this is why I really love the comeback stories. It's an ability to rewrite your story and to reform what trajectory really looks like and a successful trajectory looks like. I love that. I want to get into one question before we get into our final segment, and that's around what turnaround are you really the most proud of in your career thus far?
Good one. That was a good one. So Shinsei Bank was the original turnaround. It was a really interesting story. Private equity bought this company for $1, listed it for $5 billion. It was a Harvard case study. The government nationalized the bank and then sold it and guaranteed all the loans. I can't really take credit for it. I was like an employee there. I wasn't like I wasn't a Goldman Sachs partner or the guys at Ripplewood that put the trade on. I think the thing that I've been involved in, so LedgerX was really kind of exemplar. There was a company that I came in as CEO at 1-0, and we but like kind of but we really, it was a team. We ended up just running the business for cash flow.
Okay.
And then that was at this venture fund where I met Lauren. So I think those two are like probably the two most exciting ones. I love my portfolios. I think we're going to have some really interesting stories to be telling in 3 years.
Yeah.
But these things take time. This is not a 6 months and like, this is a slow and steady. Change takes time.
Yeah.
Culture change takes time. The LedgerX, I think for me, I know you wanted to touch upon LedgerX.
For my own selfish reasons, but yes.
It was such a interesting story. I met these guys in 2014.
Yeah.
Funding team.
Oh,
And,
so this is, I mean,
terrible investment for me. Terrible investment.
Do
Because I could buy like Bitcoin. I personally, I met Joe Lubin, and I knew the guy that he went to high school with.
Other value proposition still to this day.
LedgerX or Ethereum?
Yeah, LedgerX.
I missed that one. So yes, one of the things that I really like. I said this is also like maybe why I'm not like this amazing venture investor, but I think it's like it pays to be off the beaten path.
Yeah.
And in fintech, almost every securities investment company is focused in the SEC world. Securities and exchange, right? ETFs, stock trading, blah, 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 all this stuff. LedgerX in 2013, 2014 was started by 3 or 4 folks, 2 folks from Goldman that were traders. Zach, who ultimately led the turnaround as the CEO and then exited. He's amazing. He was the CTO. But their vision was to create a regulated clearinghouse and exchange for derivatives. And so if you think about the CFTC world, right? Commodities Future Trading Commission world, almost no one knows about it. Like 99% of fintech folks have no idea what the CFTC is.
Yeah.
Yet, like, the volume in that world is way bigger than the volume in the securities world.
Yeah.
Right? Between futures, forwards, options, all
Sure.
that stuff lives
Sure.
and CFTC land. And the reason why the volume is bigger there is short-term trading gets 65% long-term capital gains treatment.
Yeah.
There's no reason to buy an S&P ETF if you can trade the future or forwards in the same way, because you'll get long-term capital gains treatment for short-term trading. So all of institutions, all the volume is there. Interest rate derivatives, everything is in that world, right? Like it is like 100x the size of the securities world.
Yeah.
Like notional dollars traded. And so these guys, young team, they were like, hey, we want to be the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, CME, of crypto.
Cool.
And in order to do that, we need to get a clearinghouse license, and then we need to get an exchange license. It turns out getting an exchange license is pretty easy. There are like about 30 of them. Maybe it's more now. But there are only like 3 or 4 live clearinghouses in the US.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It's ICE. Cantor Fitzgerald tried to do one, failed. And then, like, here you have LedgerX trying to do that. That's a wild, hairy, audacious business plan. And the reason for that is not because of the crypto piece, though I'll get to the crypto in a second, but because once you're a clearinghouse, you can clear anything. You can clear wheat, you can clear gold, you can clear whatever. It doesn't just have to be crypto. You can do whatever you want. And so they got the clearinghouse exchange in 2017, but fully collateralized, which is not capital efficient.
Yeah.
And the reason why it was so interesting and why I came back was that what was happening in crypto land, I don't know if you or the audience is crypto, is that what I feel is like the core innovation in crypto from a trading perspective is the perpetual.
Yeah.
So overseas, almost all the volume is perpetual. No one trades physical Bitcoin. They trade something called a perpetual. It's like a perpetual derivatives contract on an underlying commodity. In this case, it happens to be Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That is an insane idea. Because if you think about it, every pension plan in the US has to have exposure to commodities.
Right.
And they're still trading the commodities product from like the 1900s, which is like, I buy the thing 1 month from now, it expires, and I need to roll it, and I got to buy the next thing. That is super capital efficient. People lose so much money doing that. And if all they wanted was perpetual exposure, why not give them perpetual exposure? So that was like the big thing that we were working on in 2020. And that's the thing that, like, we basically said, we need like hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion, to go get the authority in the US to basically list the first perpetual. And yes, it was crypto. That's where we started. That's where LedgerX started. But crypto was like nothing. Imagine issuing a perpetual on derivatives. The volume is insane. And we're talking trillions of dollars a day.
Yeah.
And perpetual, people need continuous exposure. No one needs, like, the guy that needs 30 days exposure is like the pig farmer that's got to sell his pigs. And he's like, I got 100 pigs and they're really fat. I got to hedge my exposure. 99% of financial world, I'm just trying to trade this shit. I'm trying to or I need like consistent exposure and I'm getting killed on these rolls.
Yeah.
And so that was the big idea. That was like the venture scale idea. And that was why
2014?
In 2014, so I have a comment on that, because I kept on saying this team, but in 2014, their idea was to go build and get the license to have a clearinghouse and exchange.
Wow.
And that is like such a bonkers business plan, because it's like there's no one else like in fintech land that's saying, I'm going to go get a clearinghouse exchange. A clearinghouse, this is crazy, I didn't realize this until afterwards. A clearinghouse can post to the Fed. Like banks can post to the Fed, like all these guys like SoFi and everyone's trying to get like these like small, narrow banking charters so they can post to the Fed without being regulated. We can post to the Fed.
Yeah.
Or LedgerX can post to the Fed. LedgerX is federally regulated, so money transmitter laws didn't apply to it. It didn't need all these MSBs and money transmitter licenses that Kraken and Coinbase, all these other guys needed to get. Like,
Right.
we're exempt. We have this federal license. And so like it was in 2014, we didn't know all of this. And I'm not saying I was a big investor, but I was a small investor.
Yeah.
I got Morgan Stanley to sponsor them through the wealth management group to give them a bank account because Mt. Gox had failed. No one could get a bank account. And then I don't know if that's what led to it, but then Lightspeed and Jeremy Liu
Yeah.
he eventually stepped off the board prior to the turnaround because it was just way too small. It wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
But the vision, like coming into 2020, we're looking overseas and we're like, all the volumes in perpetuals, that is a real innovation. That should be in the US. I firmly believe someone, it's probably Mayax who bought the assets out of the estate. Zach is still there, amazing CEO. Someone should bring the perpetual to the US. It is a product that makes sense in our financial markets. I don't know when it will happen. It is already happening overseas. And FTX, right? Like we basically took the clearinghouse and so we opened it up to a bunch of other guys. Kalshi is a customer of LedgerX, or used to be. They have a prediction market, right? Different things. So they're an exchange, but we're the clearinghouse for that. We looked at a bunch of other things. We looked at like gambling. We looked at like cannabis. We looked at that palladium, but like the stuff that China makes. And people were like, hey, we want to create this like tiny little exchange. And they needed a clearinghouse, and we were the clearinghouse.
Well,
We custodied all this cash or the assets. If we ever got to that point, we would have had a warehouse to custody precious metals, rare metals.
do you feel like if FTX didn't exist, there would have been another buyer out there?
First of all, you got to remember in 21 when we sold, like there were a ton of SPACs. Like we were talking to SPACs.
So you're thinking of,
That was like but like FTX at the time, obviously now, like in hindsight, we know what SBF.
right. Yeah.
And there was a genius play. They had raised a bunch of money.
Yeah.
They'd paid $300 million cash. And then they went out and raised like another $2 billion. And what did they raise the $2 billion on? I don't know, because I haven't seen the deck. But they raised it right after closing LedgerX.
Yeah.
It was because this thing was like so unique.
Yeah.
It was like no one else had it.
That's incredible.
So that's why it was like so exciting. And it was exciting because Zach came in, he left the company, came back.
Yeah.
We basically overhauled the entire team. We had $1 million lease. We got rid of that. Like we did all the playbook like we did. And Zach was like so commercial about things. Like stuff that he built, he's we don't need that. We can just outsource that. Like, why are we spending? Like, it was just like a true owner mentality.
Yeah.
Which like is rare to see, but when you see it, you're like, oh my God, like, I don't know what you're doing, but I want to be part of that.
Yeah. It sounds like you were like in the weeds with Zach.
I was, yeah. So I was in it almost till the end. Like we were,
That's crazy.
We were doing BD, hiring, like kind of the playbook. I mean, it was Zach was in it. I was an advisor, but I was like 50+% of my time.
Yeah.
Working on just random things. So it was like, there were so many things that were broken, right? Like we were trying to fix things.
Yeah. Audience is going to ask, right? Did you get a glimpse of how FTX operated and SBF? And
I know a lot of the guys that
crazy.
So LedgerX was bought, and then like almost everyone moved with the company to become part of FTX.
Yeah.
And I've stayed in touch with many of them. Like for a time, it was like amazing. Like people were like, hey, we're going to a basketball game. We had the suites, or we're doing this. We're at the bottom. I don't think, and look, Zach probably knew him better than most. Like I'm talking about like, I brought in like a buddy who was like GC or assistant GC. I don't think like a lot of people knew what was going on at FTX.
Yeah.
He had wanked a ton of people. It was, I think like everything was gone and then it wasn't, right? And it was probably like a space of 2 weeks. But like when the money is flowing, and this is true in venture as well, like no one asks questions. People are not asking questions like, why do I have 100 seats on the SaaS thing? Like thing just renewed. I'm renewing for 100 seats. Like you only have 8 people using it. Like why are you paying for 100 seats? Like, and people just are not paying attention. It's just like
clouds a lot of judgment and perception on so many things.
But it's true in 2007 at Lehman Brothers. I don't know, like Why is like FTX like so different?
Going on
Mhm.
in securitization, same thing.
Just another agents.
We got one of their, so FTX started their nonprofit and they were going to use all this money to do good, right? That was their whole point. So we got that at my last firm and we get their bookkeeping. And I remember being in this meeting and they're like, so we got their bookkeeping. It's a spreadsheet and we can't figure out where any of this money is coming from. It's not being recorded. We can't work on this. So we had to like basically turn them down and didn't end up doing anything for them after 2 weeks of looking at their books because our bookkeepers were like, no, these are not books. We can't do this. We like literally there's nothing for us to do. We can't figure out what we're supposed to do here. It was a mess.
The crypto funds, I find it, we saw a bunch of them. I don't know like how they kept their books. And the controls were like crazy. Like you have the private key and then you just move stuff around. They're like,
This is like accountability 101.
yeah. I just look, a lot of people have made money in crypto.
Yeah.
And I think we'll continue to, I'm not down on crypto. Like I think there's a money flow thesis to Bitcoin. But if you're running a crypto fund and you've got all these tokens and you've got a fiduciary to your investors, my God, that's got to be scary. Like you lose a private key, someone steals it, like just the record key. That's, you almost, I would say, the guys that have done really well almost did not know what they're doing and that helped them.
Yeah.
Because if you knew what you were doing, you're like, I can't touch this. Crazy.
Yeah. I know I said we were going to move into our next segment and our final segment. I have one last question just on this issue.
I do have to go home at some point.
Yeah. So let's
No,
really
like,
quickly.
say 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah, we're good in five,
Uh-huh.
10 minutes. Like really quick on this subject. When you due diligence a deal now, how long is the time frame for the due diligence? And you don't have to qualify with anything. Just give me a
No, look, retail folks, we can move as quickly as 3 to 4 weeks. But in practice, like that's almost never the case.
Okay.
And partly that's because any business that we're interacting with, like in addition to getting to know the people and like talking to customers is good, but we want to talk to folks that are not customers.
Yeah.
And we want to like really understand the product. And we want to really develop a thesis of, okay, what are we going to change?
Mhm.
And if you think about these processes, they're all messy, right? Like founder comes to us, bank comes to us, venture fund comes to us.
Yeah.
And we're like, hey, we want to know about the business. And we're getting like, week 1, we get 2 hours of the founder's time. And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the data room's a mess and whatever. And then week 2, we're getting like 3, 4 more hours. But tell us like what the deal is. We don't want you to talk to the management team. Excuse me.
Bless.
So
Yeah.
there's just like a cadence. There's like a natural cadence. And then putting the diligence aside, we're not doing quality of earnings generally. You think of a private equity deal, like we'll have a third party. But depending on the company, we will do forensic accounting.
Yeah.
We will bring in a third party accounting firm to say, hey, reconcile cash in against revenue. Because we've seen a lot of fraud, right? So we want to know like that if here are the books, and we've seen companies that have 2 different books. We've seen companies that have basically told the lenders that the convertible notes were actually revenue to get the. So we see like crazy shit. And so that tells me that you see it once, there's probably a lot more.
It's going to repeat. Yeah.
Right. And so it's not, oh, we think founders are bad.
Yeah.
But we've got a fiduciary duty. And we know that like when people's backs are against the wall, they will do things that like they're going to regret. Right. And so that's totally fine. But we try to uncover that before we step in.
Before you jump in, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Okay. All right. Listen, this has been a lot of fun. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I know Bree and I could sit here and monopolize your night. And I think we all have loved ones that we need to get back to and lives to live. So I'd like to invite you to play a game we play on each episode. It's a segment that we now call Drinks with the VC's Fidelity 5 questions. We'll ask you a question. It's rapid fire. Are you ready to play?
Let's go.
All right, here we go. Bree, you want to start us off?
What's your go-to karaoke song?
It's Bonsai. It's a Japanese song.
That
Oh,
makes sense. Did you do a lot of karaoke in Japan?
I did. That's how I learned how to read.
okay.
If all Japanese, you have to read it very fast. It's
I
an
love it.
amazing
That's
way.
so
Like
cool.
if someone's learning English, I'd be like, go to karaoke,
Yeah.
have fun, and just learn how to sing English songs
Oh, that's such a great idea. I love that.
That's
or any
perfect.
language. Italian.
Okay.
Go to like an Italian karaoke.
Okay. All right. The second question is, if you could invest in any fictional startup from a movie, TV show, or book, what would it be?
Any fictional startup.
Yeah. My favorite is the hoverboard. Partially towards
interesting.
Back to the Future.
Yeah, I was thinking like something in the Star Wars universe.
Like a lightsaber, maybe?
Yeah, a lightsaber or just some kind of energy implements. I don't know. Like it's
Oh,
the
yeah.
fact that like these guys like colonize all these planets. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody must be making these engines.
The hyper jump ship, right? You have
Yes.
the circle. Yeah. Okay.
And so like in my true nature, like hyper jump ship, probably Elon Musk. What about the filters to clean the air? The people that are in the ships. I'm like, do a small thing. Like,
That's
Yeah.
hilarious. I want that.
Okay.
I want
I
that
like
too.
this next question is particularly a fun one for you. If you could do it all over again, would you rather be an investor or a builder?
oh, I see. My Twitter account got hacked, but it was my Twitter handle is Investor Builder.
Oh.
So like we actually as investors, we think we're builders, right? Like we're
Yeah.
co-building with the teams that we're investing in.
Yeah.
So I think I love what I'm doing right now because ultimately I get to build. I don't think I'm a good 0 to 1 person,
Yeah.
but I think I'm a better 1 to 10 person. And this is the thing that I should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. All right. What movie best fits the future of the human race? Wall-E, where we've all degenerated into an obese state due to anti-gravity and metaverse. Avatar, where we're dominated by this quest for resources, new worlds, walking around in avatar bodies. Or The Matrix, where we're all in a simulation.
Oh, that's interesting. I just finished watching Fallout. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I think like Avatar is I'd probably pick Avatar, but I don't think the Matrix is too far behind.
Mm.
Like there's something about the human brain is like very efficient
Yeah.
and the way that it computes.
Yeah.
And so if you think about AI, the amount of energy that it's consuming,
Yeah.
like the question is like, does genetic compute can it outperform silicon compute?
Yeah.
Mm.
Like from an energy standpoint, I don't know.
You know what we need to do one of these days? We need to get Arun and Jeremy Kaufman from Scale Ventures talking about AI together.
Oh,
Yeah. We've been developing our thesis around AI.
Okay. All right. Episode, whatever down the road, gonna bring you back in, talk about mentorship, talk about AI and all these other great things we couldn't talk about. All right. Last question. Bree, do you want to ask it?
what is the one deal you passed on that you wish you hadn't?
Oh, ETH pre-sale, hands down.
Okay. All right.
That one was a huge miss. It was off. It wasn't in my off the beaten path playbook that we have with MBM.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one. I still have the memo and the mini fund that we were going to set up to buy a chunk of the pre-sale.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You've been super transparent and just incredibly candid about everything tonight, from your upbringing to MBM's thesis. And I found it really, Bree, and I don't mean to speak for you, Bree, but I feel like it was so refreshing to get that level of transparency from something that it's not easy to talk about, right?
Mhm.
So just really appreciate that and appreciate your time, obviously. And in that effect, we have one last boxing for you. If you could just up that.
What's that here? I love this wrapping paper, by the way.
Yes. It's an Amazon special.
Here we go.
You've done a phenomenal job, Rob. I will say this is
The reveal.
Here we go. Oh, look at this.
Oh, nice.
Oh, this is super cool.
It
Oh,
has your logo on there. We love doing that for emerging fund managers. And
oh, this is amazing.
now you won't be matching any other VC at the conference. You have your own bespoke vest.
I love it. I'm gonna put it on right now. It is
Okay,
summertime,
there we go.
so like, but this is great. Oh, thank you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, if you needed to lose the button down underneath there and just go best and shirtness, I feel like you could do that.
I would
Mhm.
blend into the guys that are walking down.
Yeah. Fashion Week, eat your heart out, I think.
Oh, this is beautiful. Thank you so much. This has been fun.
That's all right.
You're so
I
welcome.
really enjoyed this. And by the way, I'm looking forward to meeting in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
we
yeah.
will. We will. As we always love to do, we like to have our guest take 10 seconds to lift a glass and cheers us out.
Let me pour like
Yeah. A little one. A little
a small one.
You've been a champ. The Yamazaki has been flowing this whole episode, so that's great. But this is your opportunity to pull attention to anything, to thank mom, whatever it might be. We appreciate you, and this is your moment.
Yeah, this is really to family. Dad, mom, my daughter, my wife, my sister, just everyone that's been there. Thank you.
Amazing.
Cheers.
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 Thanks for cozying up and listening to another episode of Drinks with a VC. We are so grateful for our listener support. Feel free to reach out and add any of your questions to the comment section. If you have an idea for a guest or have some feedback, reach out to us on LinkedIn.
If you liked that last episode, be sure to check out our others featuring VCs from Lightspeed, Bessemer, Hannah Gray, BTV, and Norwest. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers.